Blood hit the linoleum in thick drops, trailing from the gurney as EMTs sprinted through the double doors of Silverline General. Claire Bennett didn't look up from her station. She'd learned long ago that looking eager only invited dismissal. But her hands had already stopped moving. Her pulse had already changed, because the wounded man on that stretcher had just made a hand signal that no civilian should recognize, and Claire's fingers had answered before her brain could stop them. A combat recognition sequence. Left thumb across knuckles. 2 taps. The dying commander's eyes found hers through the chaos, and in that split second, everything Claire had buried for 3 years clawed its way to the surface. He knew. And someone else might have seen. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, I want to hear from you. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe, hit the bell, and don't leave until you know how this ends. Because what looks like an ordinary shift is about to become something none of them will survive unchanged. The fluorescent lights in Silverline General's ER had a hum that burrowed into your skull if you listened too long. Claire had stopped hearing it sometime during her 2nd year. Now it was just part of the static, background noise, like the murmur of relatives in the waiting room, the rhythmic beep of monitors, the shuffle of her own unremarkable footsteps on floors that never got properly clean. She restocked gauze in Trauma Bay 3 with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times and expected to do it 1,000 more. Her scrubs were wrinkled. They always were. She'd stopped ironing them after the first month, after she realized no one looked at her long enough to notice. Bennett. Dr. Ethan Cole's voice cut through the static without rising in volume. He had that gift, the ability to sound exhausted and condescending at the same time. When you're done playing housekeeper, we've got actual patients. Claire didn't respond. She'd learned that too. Words made you visible, and visibility led to questions. She finished the restock in silence and moved to the triage station, where a kid with a possible broken wrist sat texting with his good hand while his mother filled out forms in angry, stabbing pen strokes. Claire checked his fingers for circulation, asked the standard questions, logged the answers. The mother didn't look at her. The kid didn't either. Invisible by design. It was safer that way. The ER had a rhythm, and Claire had become part of its white noise. She was the nurse who showed up on time, never called in sick, never pushed back. She took the grunt work without complaint, the bedpans, the discharged patient tutorials, the family members who needed someone to yell at. She absorbed it all with the same flat patience, the same forgettable face. Dr. Cole kept her at arm's length, which was exactly where she needed to be. He was lead trauma attending, mid-40s, perpetually disappointed in a staff that couldn't read his mind. He had the kind of ego that required constant feeding, and Claire had made herself the least interesting meal in the room. Bennett, room 4 needs a linen change. Bennett, grab me a suture kit. Bennett, where the hell is... Never mind, I'll get it myself. She was a verb, not a person, a function, and that was the point. The other nurses had stopped trying to befriend her after the first 6 months. She didn't join them for after-shift drinks, didn't participate in birthday collections or baby shower planning, didn't offer opinions during break-room gossip sessions. She simply existed in the margins, performing tasks that kept the department running while drawing zero attention to herself. Jessica Rodriguez, one of the senior RNs, had tried the hardest. Invited Claire to lunch 3 times in the first month. Got polite declines each time. Eventually, stopped asking. "You're wasting your time," Dr. Cole had told Jessica once, not bothering to lower his voice. "Bennett's not here to make friends. She's here to do what she's told and collect a paycheck." Jessica had looked offended on Claire's behalf. Claire hadn't reacted at all, because Dr. Cole was right, even if he didn't understand why. By 8 p.m., the ER had settled into its usual controlled chaos. A stomach bug in Bay 2, a construction worker with a nail through his boot in Bay 5, an elderly woman with chest pain being prepped for transfer upstairs. Claire moved between them like a ghost, anticipating needs before they were spoken, deflecting gratitude with a soft smile that never reached her eyes. She was refilling an IV bag when she overheard 2 residents talking near the nurses' station. "Did you see the directive from administration? About the security upgrade? Yeah. Seems excessive for a civilian hospital. They're installing facial recognition at all the entrances, metal detectors too. Since when does Silverline need that kind of setup? Since someone upstairs decided we're a potential target, I guess. Claire's hand didn't shake as she hung the IV bag, but something cold settled in her chest. She'd chosen Silverline General specifically because it was unremarkable. Mid-sized, adequate, but not prestigious. The kind of place where staff turnover was high enough that no one asked too many questions about new hires. The kind of place where you could disappear into the bureaucracy. Facial recognition changed that equation. She made a mental note to check the parking lot cameras when her shift ended to see if the new security measures had already gone live. If they had, she'd need to start looking for another position, somewhere smaller, more rural, somewhere the infrastructure was a decade behind. It was exhausting, this constant calculation, this endless low-level vigilance. But it beat the alternative. She was logging vitals for the elderly woman in Bay 6 when the EMTs burst through the ambulance bay doors. Incoming, GSW, to the chest, massive blood loss, BP crashing. The words blurred together, but Claire's body had already started responding in ways she couldn't afford. Her pulse kicked up. Her vision sharpened. Muscle memory she'd spent 3 years suppressing clawed its way to the surface, and she forced it back down with the same brutal efficiency she'd learned in a desert on the other side of the world. Not here. Not now. But then she saw him. The man on the gurney was mid-40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from too many missions and not enough sleep. His fatigues were soaked through with blood, and his breathing was shallow, ragged. One of the EMTs was doing compressions. The other was rattling off vitals that didn't make sense unless you understood what a tension pneumothorax looked like in real time. Systolics at 70, and dropping tracheal deviation, decreased breath sounds right side. He's coding, and as they wheeled him past, his right hand moved. Not a spasm, not a twitch, a signal, left thumb across the knuckles, 2 deliberate taps, friendly, combat zone, trust no one. Claire's hand answered before she could think. Index and middle finger to her temple. 1 tap, received, holding position. It was instinct, reflexive, stupid, and the man's eyes found hers, sharp, lucid, calculating, before they rolled back and the monitor flatlined. Trauma 1, now, Dr. Cole's voice snapped through the chaos. Move, people. The team swarmed. Claire stayed at her station, hands shaking, pulse hammering in her ears. She'd just made a recognition signal to a dying special operations officer in the middle of a civilian ER, and if anyone had seen, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, no message, just a single image. A photo of the hospital parking lot, taken 10 minutes ago. Her car in the frame. She deleted it immediately, but the damage was done. They know where you are. Claire forced herself to breathe normally, to move with the same unremarkable efficiency she'd cultivated for 3 years. She disposed of the used gauze from Bay 6, checked the elderly woman's oxygen saturation, made a note for the incoming shift. But her mind was racing through contingencies. The signal could have been coincidence. Combat veterans sometimes retain muscle memory, made gestures without conscious thought. It didn't necessarily mean he'd recognized her specifically, except he had. She'd seen it in his eyes, that flash of confirmation before he'd crashed, and the photo meant someone else had seen it too. She needed to leave, finish her shift, clock out, get to her car before anyone asked questions. She had a go bag in her trunk. Always had. Cash, documents, burner phones. She could be in another state by morning, but as she turned toward the staff locker room, Dr. Cole's voice stopped her. Bennett. She turned. He was standing in the doorway of Trauma 1, still gowned and gloved, blood on his scrubs. I need you in here. I'm not assigned to trauma. I don't care. We're short-staffed, and he's unstable. Get in here. It wasn't a request. Claire walked into Trauma 1 with the same measured steps she'd used for 3 years, but everything inside her was screaming to run. The patient was on the table, chest cracked open, Dr. Cole's hands working to control bleeding that wouldn't stop. The monitors were screaming. 2 residents flanked him, one managing the airway, the other trying to get IV access in veins that kept collapsing. I need suction, Cole snapped. And someone find me the source of this bleed. Claire moved to the suction, but her eyes were on the patient's chest cavity, on the trajectory of the wound, on the pattern of damage that came from a specific type of round fired at a specific range. Not a random shooting, an assassination attempt. Bennett, suction, now. She complied, but her mind was cataloging details. The patient's hands, calloused in patterns that came from rappelling and climbing. The scars on his forearms, consistent with close-quarters combat. The tattoo, partially visible above his collarbone, unit insignia, Special Operations Command. "He's crashing again," the resident said. "V-fib." "Charge to 200, Cole ordered. "Charging. Clear." The patient's body jerked. The monitor blipped, then settled into an erratic rhythm. "Still not stable," the resident said. We're losing him." Claire's eyes went to the chest cavity again, to the asymmetry she'd spotted from across the room. "Dr. Cole," she said quietly. His right lungs collapsed. "I can see that, Bennett. We're managing—" "You're not managing it. You're missing it." Her voice stayed level, but something had shifted. The rib fragments punctured the pleura. "There's a tension pneumothorax building. If you don't decompress now, cardiac output drops to 0 in under 90 seconds. The room went quiet. Dr. Cole looked up, and for the first time in 3 years, he actually saw her. "What did you just say?" "Decompress the lung. Right side, second intercostal space. You've got maybe a minute before he codes for real." "Bennett, you're a floor nurse. You don't—" "I'm telling you what's killing him." Cole's jaw tightened. "Get out! Decompress the—" "I said get out!" The monitor alarm intensified. The patient's oxygen saturation plummeted, and Claire stopped thinking. She moved past the resident, grabbed a 14-gauge needle from the crash cart, and drove it into the second intercostal space at the midclavicular line with the precision of someone who'd done it in the back of a moving vehicle under enemy fire. The rush of air was immediate and unmistakable. The monitor stabilized. The patient's sats climbed. His cardiac rhythm evened out, and every person in that room was staring at her. Claire stepped back, hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She set the needle in the sharps container, stripped off her gloves, met Dr. Cole's eyes. "His lungs decompressed," she said calmly. "You can close now." Cole's face cycled through shock, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. "You just performed an invasive procedure," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "without authorization, without supervision, without any medical justification except your own assessment. I saved his life. You violated protocol. I did what needed to be done. Your job," Cole said, voice rising now, "is to follow orders, not to override attending physicians, not to perform procedures you're not trained for." "I am trained for it." The words hung in the air. Cole stared at her. "What?" Claire didn't answer, because she'd already said too much, crossed too many lines, and there was no walking it back now. One of the nurses was staring at the patient's dog tags. "Dr. Cole," she said quietly. "He's military, special operations." Cole's attention snapped to the dog tags, to the insignia on the patient's uniform, to the calluses on his hands and the scars that told a story no civilian accumulated. "Why," he said slowly, "is a special operations soldier in a civilian ER?" No one answered, because the real question, the one Claire could see forming behind Cole's eyes, was different. Why had a floor nurse just performed battlefield medicine like she'd done it 100 times before? Claire's phone buzzed again. She didn't check it, didn't need to, because through the glass partition, she could see a man in a dark jacket standing in the waiting area. He wasn't checking in, wasn't waiting for treatment. He was watching Trauma 1, watching her. And when their eyes met, he smiled. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, moving with the kind of calculated casualness that came from years of blending into crowds. Claire's pulse spiked. "I need to use the restroom," she said. "You need to stay right here," Cole shot back. "We're not done." But Claire was already moving, stripping off her gown as she walked, pushing through the trauma bay doors before he could stop her. She hit the hallway at a controlled pace, not running. Running drew attention, but fast enough to keep the man in the dark jacket in sight. He was heading toward the main entrance, phone to his ear, speaking too quietly for her to hear. Claire followed at a distance, tracking him through the crowd of visitors and staff. He passed the security desk without slowing, pushed through the main doors into the parking lot. She stopped at the entrance, watching through the glass as he crossed to a dark SUV parked in a loading zone. No plates on the front, tinted windows. He climbed into the passenger seat. The SUV didn't leave. Claire's chest tightened, because if they weren't leaving, they were waiting. For her. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the emergency contact she'd programmed 3 years ago and never used. Then the hospital intercom crackled to life. Code Silver, Code Silver. All staff report to supervisors. Lockdown procedures in effect. Code Silver. Active threat. Armed intruder. The main doors locked with an audible click. Claire turned and saw security guards moving through the lobby, hands on their radios, eyes scanning the crowd. And behind them, walking through the ER entrance with the purposeful stride of someone who belonged, was another man in a dark jacket. Then another. 3 total. Moving in formation, spreading out to cover exits. Claire backed away from the entrance, pulse racing, mind calculating angles and distances and options that were all bad, because they weren't here to watch anymore. They were here to finish what they'd started. Dr. Cole found her in the stairwell. "Bennett, what the hell?" "Stay back." Claire's voice came out harder than she'd intended. "Go back to the ER. There's a lockdown. Security's saying there might be an armed." "There is. Multiple." Cole stopped mid-step. "How do you know that?" "Because they're here for him." She nodded toward Trauma 1, 2 floors below. "The patient you just stabilized." "That doesn't make any sense. He's a soldier. Why would—" "He's not just a soldier." Claire's hands were steady now, her breathing controlled. "He's a target, and everyone in this hospital just became collateral." Cole's face went pale. "You need to tell me what's happening. I need you to go back to the ER and make sure your patients are secured. Lock the trauma bays. Don't let anyone in unless you verify their credentials." "Who the hell do you think you are to—" "Someone who's seen this before?" Claire met his eyes. "Someone who knows what comes next." For the first time since she'd started working at Silverline General, Dr. Ethan Cole looked at her and saw something other than the forgettable floor nurse who took orders without question. He saw someone dangerous. "You're not just a nurse," he said quietly. "No. You're military." Claire didn't confirm or deny, just held his gaze. "Were you sent here?" Cole asked. "Is this some kind of— I came here to disappear, same as you'd run if someone wanted you dead." "Someone wants you dead?" "Someone wants him dead." She nodded toward Trauma 1 again. "I'm just in the way now." Cole's radio crackled. "All medical staff, this is security. We have reports of armed individuals in the building. Stay in secure locations. Do not approach anyone you don't recognize." Claire started down the stairs. "Where are you going?" Cole demanded. "To make sure they don't get to him." "That's security's job, duh." "Security's job is to protect the hospital. My job—" She stopped, looked back at him. "My job is to finish what I started." She disappeared down the stairwell before he could respond. The hallway outside Trauma 1 was empty when Claire arrived. Too empty. The guards who'd been stationed at the door were gone. No sign of struggle. No blood. Just an absence where there should have been a presence. Claire approached slowly, every sense on high alert. The door to the recovery room was open 6 inches. She could hear voices inside, low, controlled. "Don't know where it is. He has to know. They wouldn't have sent him without, then wake him up and ask." Claire recognized the cadence, the tactical shorthand. These weren't random attackers. They were professionals. And they were interrogating Commander Reed. She moved to the door, peered through the gap. 3 men in tactical gear, suppressed weapons drawn. Reed was conscious, but barely, strapped to the bed, blood seeping through his bandages. One of the men had a knife to his throat. "Last chance," the man with the knife said. "Where's the drive?" Reed's eyes were unfocused, his voice weak. "Don't know." "Wrong answer." The knife pressed deeper. Claire didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. She kicked the door open, grabbed the crash cart just inside the entrance, and shoved it hard into the nearest attacker. He went down, weapon skittering across the floor. The second attacker turned, raising his weapon. Claire was already inside his guard, hand on his wrist, redirecting the barrel as she drove her knee into his solar plexus. He folded. She stripped the weapon and put 2 rounds into his thigh. The third man, the one with the knife, spun toward her. "Don't," Claire said, weapon trained on his center mass. "I'm faster." He smiled. "Bennett, heard you'd gone soft." "You heard wrong. Put the gun down. We're all professionals here." Professionals don't interrogate dying men in hospitals. He's not dying. You made sure of that. The man's grip on the knife tightened, which means he can still tell us where the drive is. There is no drive. Then you won't mind if I confirm that. He pressed the knife against Reed's throat hard enough to draw blood. Claire's finger tightened on the trigger, and then Reed spoke, voice barely a whisper. Uploaded 2 hours ago. You're too late. The man with the knife went very still. Liar. Check. The network logs. Reed's eyes found Claire. She knows the protocol. Claire's mind raced. Because she didn't know what Reed was talking about, didn't know what drive they were looking for, but she understood the play he was making. Confirmation. The man with the knife studied her face. You upload it? You think I'd tell you if I did? I think you're bluffing. Then call it. They stared at each other across the hospital room, weapons drawn, a dying commander between them. And then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, bathing everything in red. And in that half second of distraction, Claire fired. The round took the man with the knife in the shoulder. He dropped, cursing, weapon clattering. Claire was moving before he hit the ground, crossing to Reed, checking his vitals with one hand, while keeping her weapon trained on the attackers with the other. Can you walk? She asked Reed. No. Can you shoot? He managed a weak smile. Always. She handed him the second weapon she'd stripped, then grabbed the bed's IV pole and used it to wedge the door shut. That won't hold them long, Reed said. It doesn't need to. Claire pulled out her phone, scrolled to the emergency contact, and hit send. It rang once. This is a secure line, a woman's voice said. Identify. Eagle 79er. Authorization Tango Whiskey 3. A pause. Eagle 79er was flagged as inactive 3 years ago. I'm reactivating. Under what authority? Commander Lucas Reed, Special Operations Command. He's critically wounded and under attack at Silverline General Hospital, Chicago. I need immediate extraction and a full tactical response team. Another pause, longer this time. Confirm your identity. Claire took a breath, because saying the name meant the end of Claire Bennett, invisible floor nurse, meant stepping back into a life she'd spent 3 years burying. But Reed was bleeding out. The hospital was under siege, and the people who'd tried to kill him were the same people who'd destroyed her unit in Kandahar. Sergeant Claire Morgan, she said clearly, formerly 75th Ranger Regiment, attached Special Operations Task Force, serial number 839427756. The woman on the other end exhaled slowly. Hold your position, Sergeant. QRF is 12 minutes out. The line went dead. Claire looked at Reed. He was watching her with something that might have been respect. You really did disappear, he said. Not well enough. They've been looking for you for 3 years, ever since Kandahar. I know. You know why? Claire didn't answer, because she knew exactly why. The door shook as someone rammed it from the outside. The IV pole bent but held. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they breach, Reed said. You want to tell me what you've been doing for 3 years? Staying alive. By working as a nurse? By being nobody. You saved my life. That's not nothing. I did my job. Your job was to disappear. Mine was to find out if you were still breathing. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Mission accomplished. Another impact against the door. The IV pole cracked. Claire moved to the window, checked the drop. 4 stories. No fire escape. They're not taking us alive, she said. Good. You got a preference on how this goes? Reed smiled grimly. Same as always. Hard. The door splintered. Claire raised her weapon, centered her breathing, and waited. Because the quiet nurse who'd spent 3 years invisible had just become visible in the worst possible way. And the people coming through that door were about to learn what 3 years of suppressed instincts looked like when they finally broke free. The IV pole gave way with a metallic shriek. The door burst open, and Claire Bennett, Sergeant Claire Morgan, opened fire. The first man through the door took 2 rounds center mass before he realized what was happening. He went down hard, blocking the entrance. The second tried to use his body as cover. Claire put a round through his knee. He screamed, fell back into the hallway. Reload, she said calmly. Reed covered the door while she swapped magazines, movements automatic, muscle memory taking over. How many? He asked. At least 6 more in the building, plus however many are outside. Extraction's still 10 minutes out. Then we hold for 10 minutes. She moved to the doorway, weapon up, scanning the corridor. Empty. But she could hear voices, footsteps, the sound of tactical teams repositioning. They were regrouping. She grabbed the fallen attacker's radio, switched to the active channel. 2 down. She's got Reed secured in the recovery room. How many shooters? Just her. 1 nurse? She's not a nurse. She's moving like Tier 1. Someone confirm her ID. Claire keyed the radio. You want my ID? Come get it. Silence on the other end. Then, Sergeant Morgan, we were told you were dead. You were told wrong. You've got nowhere to go. We control the building. You control the hallways. I control the room with the man you're trying to kill. We don't want to kill him. We want what he's carrying. He's not carrying anything. Then you won't mind if we verify that. I mind you putting a knife to his throat. A pause. Then a different voice came over the radio. Older, more controlled. Sergeant Morgan, my name is Graves. We worked together in Kandahar. Claire's blood went cold. She knew that voice. I didn't work with you, she said quietly. I worked under you, until you left us to die. That's not what happened. You pulled air support. You redirected the convoy. You left 8 soldiers in a kill zone with no extraction. I followed orders. Whose? That's classified. Then we've got nothing to talk about. I think we do. Because the drive Commander Reed is carrying contains evidence that could overturn the entire Kandahar investigation. Evidence that could put some very powerful people in very small cells. Claire glanced at Reed. He was watching her, face unreadable. If you want the drive, she said into the radio, come through the door. You'll be dead in 30 seconds. Then you'll never find it. Because Reed won't talk, and I sure as hell won't. Graves was silent for a long moment. You've changed, Sergeant. You left me in a desert to die. What did you expect? I expected you to follow orders, to understand that sometimes soldiers are sacrificed for the greater mission. The greater mission, Claire repeated. Is that what you call covering up war crimes? I call it protecting national security. By killing the people who witnessed what really happened. By controlling the narrative. Claire's finger tightened on the trigger. Then control this. She fired 3 rounds down the hallway, forcing the tactical team to pull back. Then she grabbed the hospital bed with her free hand and shoved it toward the door, using it as a mobile barricade. We need to move, she told Reed. I can't walk. Then I'll carry you. You'll never make it. Watch me. She hauled him into a fireman's carry, grunting under his weight, weapon still up and tracking. The window. It was the only option. She crossed to it, looked down again. 4 stories. Pavement below. But there was a maintenance ledge 10 feet down. If she could reach it. Gunfire erupted from the doorway. Rounds punched through the hospital bed, shredding it. Claire returned fire, dropped the empty magazine, slammed in her last one. 6 rounds left. She kicked out the window, glass exploding into the night. This is gonna hurt, she told Reed. Everything hurts. She climbed onto the sill, Reed's weight threatening to pull her backward. Behind them, Graves's voice echoed through the hallway. You've got nowhere to go, Sergeant. Claire looked down at the ledge, at the drop beyond it. Then she looked back at the doorway, where shadows were moving, where the men who'd left her unit to die were preparing to finish what they'd started, and she jumped. She hit the ledge hard, knees buckling, Reed's weight nearly pulling them both over the edge. But she held. Pressed herself against the building, breathing hard, every muscle screaming. Above them, faces appeared in the window. She's on the east side ledge. Get a team down there. Claire started moving, edging along the narrow concrete, Reed's blood soaking through her scrubs. You're insane, he muttered. Staying in that room was insane. This is just calculated risk. There's nothing calculated about jumping out a 4th-story window. I landed, didn't I? The ledge ended at a corner. Beyond that, nothing but a 20-foot gap to the next building. No way across. Claire looked down. 3 stories to a dumpster. You've got to be kidding, Reed said. You got a better idea? Before he could answer, gunfire erupted from the window above. Rounds sparked off the concrete beside them. Claire didn't think. She shoved off the ledge, Reed still on her shoulders, and fell. For a second there was only wind and gravity and the absolute certainty that she'd miscalculated. Then they hit the dumpster. The impact drove the air from her lungs, sent pain lancing through her ribs. Reed rolled off her, gasping, but they were alive. Claire forced herself up, grabbed Reed, started dragging him toward the alley entrance. Behind them, voices shouted, footsteps pounded. She could see the street ahead, headlights passing, normal traffic on a normal night while 20 feet away someone was trying to kill them. Her phone buzzed. The woman's voice from before. "Extraction team is 3 minutes out. Where are you?" "East Alley, loading dock entrance." Gunfire cut her off. She dropped, pulled Reed behind a dumpster, raised her weapon. Empty. She'd used her last rounds covering their escape. The tactical team rounded the corner, weapons up. 5 men. No cover, no ammunition. Claire put herself between them and Reed, hands steady despite the adrenaline. "Final warning," Graves' voice called from the rear. "Stand down." "Or what? You shoot me in an alley like you shot the rest of my unit? Your unit died in combat. My unit died because you called off air support and left us exposed. I was there, Graves. I saw what happened. You saw what you wanted to see. I saw soldiers follow orders and die for it." Graves stepped forward, weapon lowered but ready. "This doesn't have to end badly, Sergeant. Give us the drive. Walk away. You've earned that much." "I've earned the truth. The truth is classified. Then declassify it. That's not my call." "Whose is it?" Graves didn't answer. Behind him, the tactical team spread out, cutting off every exit. And then, from the street, came the sound of heavy engines. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. The tactical team tensed, weapons tracking toward the sound. 3 black SUVs screeched into the alley, blocking both ends. Doors flew open. Men in full tactical gear poured out, moving with the precision of special operations forces. And leading them, stepping into the alley like she owned it, was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that made everyone straighten unconsciously. "Stand down," she said, voice carrying effortlessly. "All of you." Graves turned, and for the first time Claire saw uncertainty in his expression. "This is a classified operation, which is now over." The woman held up a tablet showing an official document with enough seals and signatures to end careers. "Presidential authorization. This entire investigation is being transferred to Joint Special Operations Command. Your team is relieved." "On whose authority?" "On the authority of the Commander-in-Chief. You want to argue with that? You're welcome to try." Graves stared at the document, at the woman, at the tactical team that now outnumbered his own forces 2-1. Then he lowered his weapon. "Weapons down," he told his team quietly. "Stand down." They complied, moving with the bitter efficiency of professionals who knew when they'd lost. The woman walked past them without a second glance, crouched beside Claire and Reed. "Sergeant Morgan," she said, "you look like hell." "Director Carlisle." Claire managed a weak smile. "You look great." 3 years of thinking you were dead will do that." Carlisle's eyes went to Reed. "Commander, good to see you're still breathing." "Barely," Reed muttered. "We'll get you to a proper medical facility." She stood, gestured to her team. "Medics now. Secure the scene. I want every member of Graves' team detained for questioning." "They were following orders," Claire said. "Bad orders." Carlisle looked back at Graves, who was being placed in flex cuffs. "And the people who gave those orders are about to have a very bad day." She helped Claire to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "The drive Reed mentioned," Carlisle said quietly. "Please tell me it exists." Claire reached into her pocket, pulled out a small data storage device she'd taken from Reed's uniform while treating him in Trauma 1. She'd seen it when she'd decompressed his lung, had palmed it while everyone was focused on keeping him alive. "It exists," she said. Carlisle took it, handled it like it might explode. "Do you know what's on here?" "Evidence. About Kandahar. About a lot more than Kandahar." Carlisle slipped the drive into a secure container. "This is command-level communications. Orders from people who shouldn't have been giving orders. Proof that the ambush was deliberate, that your unit was sacrificed to cover up something bigger." Claire's chest tightened. What could be bigger than 8 dead soldiers? Try a weapons deal with a hostile government. Try illegal arms transfers. Try conspiracy that goes all the way to a... She stopped. It's classified, but when this goes public, a lot of people are going to prison. Will it go public? That's not my call, but Reed risked his life to get this out. You risked yours to protect it. Carlisle met her eyes. I'll make sure it counts for something. Medics arrived, loading Reed onto a stretcher. He grabbed Claire's hand as they lifted him. You disappeared, he said. Stay that way. Too late for that. No, it's not. His grip tightened. Carlisle can make you disappear again, properly. New identity, new life. You've earned it. Claire looked at the alley, at the tactical team securing the scene, at Dr. Cole, who'd appeared at the entrance looking shell-shocked, at the life she'd built as someone invisible. I'll think about it, she said. Reed smiled faintly. Liar. They took him away. Carlisle was talking to her team leads, coordinating the handoff of Graves and his people. She caught Claire's eye, nodded toward the street. We need to debrief, full accounting, then we'll talk about next steps. Director, not here, and not now. Carlisle's expression softened slightly. You did good work, Sergeant, better than anyone had a right to expect. But this isn't over. What do you mean? I mean, the people Graves was working for don't know about this yet. Don't know you're alive. Don't know the drive is secure. She paused. We've got maybe 12 hours before they realize what happened. And when they do, they'll come for you with everything they have. Then you need to come with us, now, before they lock down the city. Claire looked back at the hospital, at the ER entrance where she'd spent 3 years being nobody. Dr. Cole was still standing there, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She walked over to him. I need to explain. Don't. He held up a hand. I don't want to know. I don't want classified briefings or official explanations. I just want to know one thing. What? Was any of it real? The nurse who worked for me. Was she real? Claire thought about the question. About the woman she'd become in 3 years. About the life she'd built from necessity and maintained through discipline. She was real, Claire said quietly. Just not complete. And now? Now I have to finish something I should have finished 3 years ago. Cole nodded slowly. The patient you saved. Reed? He'll be okay. He'll live. Because of you. Because I did my job. No. Cole's voice was firm. Because you're extraordinary at it. And I was too blind to see that. Claire didn't know what to say to that. So she just nodded, turned, and walked toward the waiting SUV. Carlisle was already inside. Claire climbed in, and they pulled away from Silverline General with the smooth efficiency of a military extraction. As they drove, Carlisle handed her a tablet showing security footage from the hospital. We've been monitoring for 2 weeks, she said, ever since we got intel that someone was hunting Reed. We didn't know they'd tracked him to Chicago, didn't know they'd used the hospital as bait to draw me out. To confirm you were alive, they needed to know if you were a threat. And now they know. Now they know you're the biggest threat they have, because you were there in Kandahar. You saw what happened, and unlike the others in your unit, you survived. Claire watched the city pass outside the window. Where are we going? Secure facility. We'll debrief, analyze the drive, and figure out next steps. And after that? Carlisle was quiet for a moment. That depends on you, Sergeant. You can disappear again. We'll give you a new identity, new background, new life. Put you somewhere they'll never find you. Or you can help us finish this. Testify. Make sure the people responsible face justice. That's not really a choice. No, Carlisle agreed. It's not. But I had to offer. The SUV merged onto the highway, headlights blurring into streams of light. And somewhere behind them, in an alley outside Silverline General Hospital, the quiet nurse named Claire Bennett ceased to exist. What remained was Sergeant Claire Morgan, and she had a war to finish. The secure facility turned out to be a repurposed industrial complex 30 miles outside Chicago, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the highway, but hummed with activity once you got past the razor wire. Claire counted at least 15 armed personnel before they reached the main entrance, all of them moving with the efficiency that came from military training and current deployment. Carlisle led her through a series of checkpoints, each requiring biometric verification. No one spoke. The silence felt intentional, like they were giving Claire space to process what had just happened. She didn't want space. She wanted answers. They ended up in a conference room with reinforced walls and no windows, the kind of room designed for conversations that couldn't be overheard or recorded without authorization. A medical team was waiting, but Carlyle waved them off. "Give us 10 minutes." The medics left without argument. Carlyle pulled out a chair, gestured for Claire to sit. She didn't. Her body was still running on adrenaline, still primed for threats that might come through the door at any second. "How long have you known I was alive?" Claire asked. "We didn't. Not for certain." Carlyle set the secure container with the data drive on the table between them. "We knew someone survived Kandahar. The after-action reports didn't add up. 8 KIA, but the physical evidence suggested 9 bodies should have been recovered. 1 set of remains was never accounted for." "You thought I was dead. We thought whoever survived had good reason to stay that way." Carlyle's eyes were sharp, assessing. "When Reed's team intercepted communications about a target in Chicago, a nurse matching your general description, we had to verify. He volunteered for the mission." "By getting shot?" "By allowing himself to be tracked. The people hunting him didn't know he was bait." Carlyle paused. "Neither did the people hunting you." Claire's jaw tightened. "So you used him to flush me out?" "We used him to confirm you were operational. There's a difference." "He almost died." "But he didn't, because you saved him." Carlyle leaned forward. "You could have walked away, kept your head down, let the other nurses handle it, but you didn't. You broke cover the second you saw a soldier in trouble." "That doesn't make me operational. That makes me human." "It makes you exactly what we need." Carlyle tapped the container. "This drive contains evidence of illegal operations conducted at the highest levels of military command, weapons transfers to hostile governments, falsified intelligence reports, orders that directly resulted in American casualties." Kandahar. Kandahar was one of 6 incidents. Your unit wasn't the first to be sacrificed, just the most visible. Claire felt something cold settle in her chest. "How many soldiers?" 43 confirmed. "Probably more we don't know about yet." The number hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent 3 years carrying the weight of 8 deaths, believing her unit had been unlucky, that they'd been in the wrong place when intelligence failed or timing went bad. But this wasn't failure. This was murder. "Who gave the orders?" Her voice came out flat, controlled. "That's what we need the drive to prove. We have communications intercepts, financial records, circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete enough to bring charges. Reed's data fills in the gaps." "Then why do you need me?" Carlyle stood, walked to the wall where a digital display flickered to life. Security footage from Silverline General appeared. Claire performing the chest decompression, Claire in the firefight, Claire jumping from the 4th floor window. "Because you're a witness. You were there when the orders came through. You heard the communications. You saw what happened when air support was pulled." Carlyle turned back to her. "And unlike everyone else in your unit, you can testify." "Testify to what?" "I was a medic. I wasn't in the command chain. You were attached to special operations. You had security clearance. You were present during classified briefings." Carlyle pulled up another screen, this one showing documents Claire hadn't seen in 3 years. "You signed off on mission parameters. You verified tactical communications. Your testimony can corroborate the evidence on this drive." Claire stared at her own signature on decades-old authorization forms, at records she'd thought were buried with her old identity. "If I testify, they'll come for me." "They're already coming for you. You just handed them proof you're alive and willing to fight back." "So my options are testify and die or refuse and die." "Your options," Carlyle said carefully, "are help us prosecute the people responsible and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, or let them get away with it and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Either way, you don't get to be invisible anymore." The door opened. One of the medics stuck his head in. "Director, Commander Reed is stable and asking for Sergeant Morgan." Carlyle looked at Claire. "You want to see him?" "Yeah?" They walked through corridors that smelled like disinfectant and gun oil, past offices where analysts hunched over computers and tactical teams prepped equipment. It felt like a forward operating base, not a secure facility on American soil. Reed was in a recovery room similar to the one at Silverline General, except this one had ballistic glass and armed guards who actually stayed at their posts. He was awake, propped up on pillows, looking pale, but alert. "You look terrible," Claire said. "You look worse." Reed managed a weak smile. "Heard you went out a window." Seemed like the best option at the time. "How's the drop?" "Painful." "Good. Means you're still human." He shifted, wincing. "Carlisle brief you?" "She told me about the drive, about the 43 soldiers." Reed's expression darkened. 43 we know about. Could be double that by the time we finish digging." Claire pulled up a chair, sat. "Why didn't you tell me what you were carrying?" "Need to know. You didn't need to know. I jumped out a window for you. And I appreciate that. But if they'd captured you, tortured you, I needed you to have plausible deniability. Instead, I grabbed it off you while you were bleeding out." Reed laughed, then immediately regretted it, hand going to his chest. "Saw that in the security footage. Nice work. You would have done the same." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have pulled off that decompression. That was clean, professional." He studied her face. "How long were you active duty?" 6 years. "All of it special operations?" "Most." "And you walked away to become a civilian nurse?" "I walked away to stay alive." Reed nodded slowly. "Can't fault that. But you're back now." "I don't have a choice." "We always have a choice, Sergeant. You could refuse. Carlisle would set you up somewhere safe. New name, new face if necessary. You could disappear for real this time." "And let them get away with it?" "People get away with worse every day. That's the world we live in." Claire looked at the bandages on his chest, at the IV lines and monitors keeping him alive. "You didn't walk away." "No, but I'm career military. This is what I signed up for." He met her eyes. "You didn't sign up to spend the rest of your life fighting a shadow war against your own command structure. Neither did those 43 soldiers. They just wanted to serve. And they died for it. So we make sure it means something." Reed was quiet for a moment. Then he reached under his pillow and pulled out a small notebook, the kind soldiers carried in the field. He handed it to Claire. "What is this?" "Names. Every soldier I could confirm died under suspicious circumstances. Dates, locations, unit assignments." His voice was rough. "Some of them I served with, some I trained. All of them deserved better than they got." Claire opened the notebook, saw page after page of handwritten entries, each one a life cut short, each one a family that got a folded flag and a story that didn't add up. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because if you're going to testify, you need to know what you're fighting for. It's not about the politics or the prosecution. It's about them." He tapped the notebook. "It's about making sure people remember they existed, that their deaths weren't just collateral damage in someone's career." Claire closed the notebook, held it carefully. "I'll testify." "Good." Reed settled back against the pillows. "Now get out of here. I need to sleep, and you need a medic to look at whatever you broke jumping out that window." Claire stood, started toward the door. "Sergeant," she turned back. "They're going to come at you hard. Character assassination. Threats. Maybe worse. You ready for that?" "No, but I'll do it anyway." Reed smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." The medics were thorough. 2 cracked ribs, multiple contusions, mild concussion, nothing that wouldn't heal given time and rest. They wanted to keep her overnight for observation. Claire declined. "I need to make some calls." The lead medic, a woman in her 30s with the no-nonsense efficiency of a field surgeon, raised an eyebrow. "You need to not re-injure yourself. That means rest." "I'll rest after." "After what?" "After I make sure the people I left behind at Silverline General aren't in danger." The medic looked at Carlisle, who'd been standing quietly in the corner. "Let her make the calls," Carlisle said, "but do it from here. We can't risk outside communication yet." They set Claire up in a small office with a secure phone line. She dialed Dr. Cole's cell number from memory. He answered on the second ring. "Bennett, is that you?" "Yeah." "Where are you?" "The hospital's in chaos. Federal agents everywhere asking questions nobody can answer. They shut down the ER for 3 hours." 3 hours, Bennett. Do you know what that does to patient care?" "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" His voice rose. "You jump out a 4th-story window after saving a classified military operative and engaging in a firefight in my trauma bay, and you're sorry?" "I didn't plan for it to happen that way." Then how did you plan for it to happen? Claire didn't have an answer for that. Cole's voice softened slightly. Are you safe? For now. Is it over? No. What do you need from me? The question caught her off guard. What? You called for a reason. What do you need? Claire thought about it. I need to know if anyone was hurt. Staff, patients, anyone. Minor injuries during the evacuation. One security guard with a graze wound from a ricochet, but no fatalities. He paused. You asking because you feel responsible? I am responsible. No, you're not. The people who came to that hospital with guns are responsible. You just happened to be in the way. I brought them there. They would have found him eventually. You just saved his life in the process. Cole was quiet for a moment. The federal agents took all the security footage, confiscated the trauma bay recordings. But I saw what happened before they locked it down. And I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen combat medics, field surgeons, trauma specialists. I've never seen anyone move the way you moved. That wasn't training. That was experience. Claire didn't respond. How many tours? Cole asked. 4? How many combat situations? I stopped counting. And you walked away from that to work as a floor nurse in a civilian hospital. I walked away to have a normal life. Did it work? Claire looked around the secure office at the reinforced walls and encrypted communication equipment. What do you think? Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. For what it's worth, you were a good nurse. Unremarkable, sure, but reliable, professional. The kind of person you want on your team, even if you don't appreciate them properly. Thanks. I'm not finished. You were also the best trauma response I've ever worked with, and I was too stupid to see it. So when this is over, whatever this is, if you want your job back, it's yours. I can't come back. Why not? Because Claire Bennett doesn't exist anymore. Cole was silent for a long moment. Then whoever you become next, I hope they know what they're worth. The line went dead. Claire sat in the empty office, phone still pressed to her ear, feeling the weight of 3 years dissolve into something she couldn't quite name. Carlisle appeared in the doorway. We've got movement. Claire stood. What kind? The kind that suggests someone just figured out we have the drive. Carlisle handed her a tablet showing satellite imagery of the facility. 3 vehicles approaching from the north, 2 from the east. Military-grade communications jamming just went active in a 5-mile radius. How long until they arrive? 15 minutes, maybe less. Evacuation? Already in progress, but we need to move the primary assets first. Carlisle met her eyes. That's you and Reed. Reed can't be moved. He doesn't have a choice. Neither do you. They got Reed into an armored transport with the help of 2 medics and a stretcher that looked like it belonged on a battlefield. He was conscious, but barely, sedated enough to manage the pain, but not enough to miss what was happening. This is bad, he muttered. It's not great, Claire agreed. How many hostiles? At least 15, probably more. Against? Carlisle checked her radio. 23 personnel on site, but half are analysts and support staff. So we're outnumbered. We're outgunned. There's a difference. Reed managed a weak smile. I like her. They loaded him into the transport. Claire climbed in after him, accepting a rifle from one of the tactical team members. It felt familiar in her hands. Too familiar. Carlisle stood at the door. There's a secondary extraction point 8 miles west. We'll draw them off here. You get Reed to safety. What about the drive? Carlisle patted her vest. Already uploaded to secure servers. Multiple redundancies. Even if they get the physical drive, the data's out. Then why are they coming? Because they don't know that yet. And because killing us sends a message. The first explosion hit before Claire could respond. The blast shook the transport, throwing her against the wall. She heard screaming outside, the sharp crack of gunfire, orders being shouted over radio static. Go! Carlisle slammed the door shut. Get him out of here! The driver didn't wait. The transport lurched forward, smashing through a chain-link gate and onto a service road that wound through the industrial complex. Claire grabbed a handhold, steadied herself, checked on Reed. He was strapped to the stretcher but conscious, eyes tracking the sounds of combat fading behind them. This is my fault, he said. Save it. I led them here. You got the evidence out. That's what matters. Another explosion, closer this time. The driver swerved, nearly rolling the transport. Claire moved to the small window, looked out. Two vehicles were pursuing them, closing fast. Black SUVs with reinforced plating and occupants leaning out windows with automatic weapons. "Contact rear," she shouted to the driver. He punched the accelerator. The transport wasn't built for speed, but it had momentum. They crashed through a parked car, sent debris flying, gained a few seconds. Not enough. Gunfire raked the transport's rear doors. Rounds punched through the armor plating, ricocheting inside the compartment. Claire dropped flat, covering Reed with her body. "Return fire," the driver yelled. Claire crawled to the rear door, found the firing port, brought up her rifle. She'd done this before. Different country, different war, but the fundamentals didn't change. Wait for the rhythm of the pursuit vehicle. Account for relative motion. Breathe. She fired in controlled bursts, targeting the lead SUV's engine block. The vehicle swerved, smoke pouring from under the hood, but kept coming. She adjusted, put rounds into the windshield. The SUV veered hard right, clipped a utility pole, and flipped. The second vehicle didn't slow. It accelerated, ramming the transport from behind. The impact threw Claire forward. Her rifle clattered away. The transport's rear doors buckled. "We've got a problem," the driver shouted. Claire looked back. The pursuing SUV was pushing them, trying to force them off the road. She scrambled for her rifle, came up shooting through the damaged doors. But the SUV had armor glass. Her rounds sparked off without penetrating. They hit a turn too fast. The transport's wheels lifted, hung suspended for a breathless second, then crashed back down. The SUV rammed them again. This time the rear doors gave way completely. Claire saw armed men preparing to board, saw the muzzle flashes as they opened fire. Then she saw something else. A helicopter, unmarked, coming in low over the industrial park. For a second she thought it was reinforcements. Then it opened fire on the transport. The driver screamed something incomprehensible. The transport swerved wildly, jumped a curb, crashed through a fence. They were in an open field now, no cover, nowhere to run. The helicopter circled, lining up for another pass. Claire grabbed the radio. "Carlisle, we've got air support. Hostile." Static answered. "Carlisle." Nothing. Reed's hand found hers. "Leave me. Take the driver and run." "Not happening." "That's an order, Sergeant." "I don't take orders from dying men." "I'm not dying." "Then shut up and let me work." She searched the transport for anything useful, found a medical kit, extra ammunition, a flare gun. A flare gun. She loaded it, kicked open the side door, and fired straight up as the helicopter made its approach. The flare shot across the helicopter's path. The pilot swerved to avoid it, breaking off the attack run. It bought them seconds. Claire used them. She grabbed Reed's stretcher, started dragging him toward a drainage ditch 20 yards away. The driver helped, both of them moving as fast as they could with a wounded man between them. The helicopter came around for another pass. But this time it wasn't alone. Two more helicopters appeared from the south, these ones marked with U.S. military insignia. The unmarked helicopter banked hard, trying to evade. The military helicopters didn't fire. They just positioned themselves, blocking escape routes, forcing the hostile bird down. It landed hard in the field, rotors still spinning. Armed personnel poured out of the military helicopters surrounding it, and from one of them, Carlisle emerged, limping but alive. She walked across the field to where Claire and the driver had taken cover, Reed between them. "You okay?" Carlisle asked. "Define okay." "Alive and functional." "Then, yeah." Carlisle looked at the hostile helicopter, at the personnel being detained. "They moved faster than we anticipated, hit the facility with everything they had." "Casualties?" "3 wounded, no fatalities." She pulled out her radio. "But we've got a bigger problem." "What?" "The attack wasn't just about stopping us. It was about sending a message. Whoever's behind this doesn't care about exposure anymore. They're willing to engage in open combat on American soil to protect themselves." Claire helped Reed sit up slightly. He was pale, breathing hard, but his eyes were sharp. "That means they're desperate," he said, "or powerful enough not to care about the consequences," Carlisle replied. "Either way," Claire said, "they just declared war. They declared war the day they left your unit to die in Kandahar." Carlisle's voice was hard. We're just finally fighting back. She gestured to the military helicopters. Get Reed to Walter Reed Medical Center. Full security detail. No one gets near him without clearance from me personally. What about Claire? The driver asked. Carlyle looked at her. That's up to Claire. I'm staying. You sure? Because the next 48 hours are going to be ugly. We're moving to prosecute based on the evidence from the drive. That means congressional hearings, media attention, and everyone involved trying to discredit or eliminate anyone who can testify. I said I'm staying. Then you need to prepare. We've got lawyers, media consultants, security specialists. All of them are going to want to talk to you. I don't need media consultants. I need to know who we're fighting. Carlyle pulled out the tablet again, called up a file. A photograph appeared. A man in his 60s, military dress uniform, chest full of medals. General Marcus Whitmore, 4-star general, former Joint Chiefs, currently serving as a defense contractor with about $6 billion in government contracts. Claire studied the face. Distinguished, confident. The kind of man who gave speeches at military academies about honor and sacrifice. He gave the orders? She asked. He coordinated them. We've got communications showing him directing operations through back channels, authorizing weapons transfers, approving mission parameters that directly resulted in casualties. Including Kandahar? Especially Kandahar. Your unit stumbled onto evidence of an illegal arms sale. They couldn't let you report it. Claire felt rage building in her chest, hot and clean. So he killed them. He had them killed. There's a difference legally, even if there isn't morally. Can we prove it? With Reed's data and your testimony? Yes. Then let's do it. Carlyle closed the tablet. Tomorrow morning, you'll be briefing a Senate Oversight Committee in a closed session. Day after that, the story goes public. You ready for that? No, but I'll do it anyway. Good. Carlyle started back toward the helicopters, then stopped. One more thing. Whitmore has resources. Money, connections, people willing to do illegal things for the right price. He's going to come after you personally, your credibility, your history, anything he can use to discredit you. Let him try. I'm serious, Sergeant. He'll dig up everything, every mistake you ever made, every person you ever hurt. He'll twist it into a narrative that makes you look unstable, unreliable, traumatized. I am traumatized. I watched my unit die. But you're not unstable, and you're sure as hell reliable. Carlyle met her eyes. Don't let him make you doubt that. They evacuated the area in 3 helicopters, leaving the hostile crew in federal custody and the facility smoldering behind them. Claire rode with Reed, watching the sun set over Chicago and thinking about the last time she'd left a war zone. She'd thought it was over then, too. Turned out war followed you home if you carried the right secrets. Reed was unconscious again, sedated for the flight. The medic monitoring him gave Claire a thumbs up. Stable, improving. She leaned back, closed her eyes, tried to inventory her injuries. The ribs hurt with each breath. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd hit the dumpster. Her head pounded from the concussion. But she was alive. And for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't running. The helicopter touched down at Walter Reed just after dark. A full security team was waiting, along with a trauma unit that whisked Reed away before Claire could say goodbye. Carlyle led her to a different building, one that didn't appear on any hospital maps. Secure rooms for witnesses and high-value targets who needed medical care and protection simultaneously. You'll stay here tonight, Carlyle said. Rest, medical monitoring, and prep for tomorrow. It's not optional. You've got 2 cracked ribs and a concussion. You need observation. Claire wanted to argue, but didn't have the energy. They set her up in a room that was part hospital, part bunker. Reinforced walls, no windows, armed guards at the door. A nurse came in to check her vitals, gave her something for the pain that she reluctantly accepted. Alone finally, she pulled out Reed's notebook. 43 names. 43 soldiers who'd trusted the chain of command and died for it. She read each entry carefully, memorized the details. Because tomorrow when she testified, she needed to remember that this wasn't about politics or prosecutions. It was about them. She was halfway through the notebook when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. Sergeant Morgan. The voice was cultured, calm. We haven't been properly introduced. My name is Marcus Whitmore. Claire's hand tightened on the phone. I know who you are. Good. Then you know I'm not a man who makes idle threats or empty promises. I'm calling to offer you one chance to walk away from this. Not interested. You should be, because I know things about you, Sergeant. Things you've worked very hard to bury. Things that might interest the Senate committee you're briefing tomorrow. Like what? Like the civilian casualties in Kandahar that were never reported. The interrogation methods your unit employed. The standing orders you violated. He paused. The people you killed. Claire's chest tightened. I followed the rules of engagement. Did you? Because I have witness statements suggesting otherwise. I have evidence of war crimes committed by your unit, evidence that will be very difficult to explain when you're under oath. You're lying. Am I? Or am I simply better informed than you realized? His voice stayed pleasant, conversational. Here's what's going to happen, Sergeant. You're going to develop cold feet. You're going to realize that testifying means exposing yourself to criminal prosecution. You're going to quietly withdraw, and in exchange, I'll make sure those witness statements never see daylight. And if I refuse, then I'll destroy you. Your career, your credibility, your freedom. I'll paint you as a war criminal looking to deflect blame. And when I'm done, no one will believe a word you say. You killed 43 soldiers. I protected national security interests. There's a difference. You murdered them. I made difficult decisions in complicated situations. That's what leaders do. He sighed. You're a good soldier, Sergeant Morgan. You deserve better than to be sacrificed on the altar of political theater. Walk away. Live your life. Find some peace. I'll see you tomorrow. Is that your final answer? Yeah. Then I'm sorry, truly. Because what happens next didn't have to happen. The line went dead. Claire sat in the empty room, phone still in her hand, knowing she'd just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in the military-industrial complex. The door opened. Carlyle entered, face grim. Whitmore just called you, didn't he? How did you know? Because he called me 5 minutes ago. Made the same threats. Same offer. What did you tell him? I told him to go to hell. Carlyle sat in the chair beside the bed. He's scared, Sergeant. That's why he's calling. Because he knows the evidence is solid and his only play is intimidation. He said he has evidence of war crimes, that I violated rules of engagement. He's bluffing. What if he's not? Carlyle was quiet for a moment. Did you violate ROE in Kandahar? Claire thought back to that day, to the chaos of the ambush, to the decisions made in fractions of seconds when bullets were flying and people were dying. I don't know, she said honestly. Everything happened so fast. We were taking fire from multiple positions. Civilians were mixed in with combatants. I did what I thought I had to do to keep my team alive. Then that's what you tell the committee. No soldier in combat makes perfect decisions. What matters is intent. Intent doesn't matter if people died. It matters when determining whether you committed a crime or fought to survive. Carlyle leaned forward. Listen to me. Whitmore is going to try to put you on trial instead of letting the committee try him. He's going to twist every decision you made, every action you took, and use it to discredit you. You need to be ready for that. I am ready. Are you? Because the woman I met 3 years ago was running from this fight, and the woman I pulled out of that hospital was still trying to disappear. Now you're walking into the most hostile environment you've ever faced, and I need to know you won't break. Claire met her eyes. I won't break. Even if he has evidence? Even if? Even if it costs you everything? Those 43 soldiers lost everything. The least I can do is risk the same. Carlyle nodded slowly. Okay, then get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long. She left Claire alone with Reed's notebook and the weight of 43 names that demanded justice. Claire read until the pain medication pulled her under, until the names blurred together into a single demand that echoed through her dreams. Tell the truth. Make it matter. Don't let them die for nothing. She woke 4 hours later to the sound of gunfire, not close, but not far enough. She rolled out of bed, ignoring the protest from her ribs, and grabbed the weapon that had been left on the table. The door burst open. One of the guards, blood streaming from a head wound. We're under attack, multiple hostiles, buildings compromised. Where's Carlyle? Coordinating defense, you need to evacuate now. But Claire was already moving, weapon up, training taking over. Because Whitmore hadn't been bluffing, and he just made his first real move. The hallway outside her room strobed with emergency lighting, casting everything in alternating red and shadow. Claire moved low, weapon tracking corners, muscle memory dragging her back to compounds in Helmand Province, where attacks came fast and coordination meant survival. The wounded guard stumbled ahead of her, one hand pressed against his bleeding scalp, the other clutching his sidearm with fingers that shook too much for accurate fire. "How many?" Claire asked. "Don't know. At least 6 breached the east perimeter. Maybe more on the west side." "Where's the security center?" "3rd floor, but they've got the stairwells." Claire grabbed his collar, steadied him. "Can you shoot?" "Yeah." "Then cover our 6. Anyone comes through that door who isn't ours, you drop them." He nodded, positioning himself at the corner with a sightline down the corridor they'd just left. Claire moved forward, clearing rooms methodically. Empty. Empty. Storage closet with medical supplies. Empty. Then she heard voices. 2 men speaking quietly in the kind of tactical shorthand that came from working together long enough to develop verbal economy. They were moving through the building systematically, clearing as they went, which meant they had training and discipline, not amateurs. She pressed herself against the wall, controlled her breathing, waited for them to pass her position. They came around the corner in a standard 2-man formation, weapons up, scanning their sectors. Claire let the first one pass, then drove her rifle stock into the second man's temple. He dropped without a sound. The first man spun, bringing his weapon around. Claire was faster. 2-round center mass. He went down. She stripped their weapons, checked their gear. No identification, no unit patches, just high-end tactical equipment and encrypted radios. Professional killers on a government payroll, except the government didn't know about them. The wounded guard appeared at her shoulder. "Nice work. We need to find Carlisle. She's probably in the command center, but that's..." Gunfire erupted from somewhere above them, sustained bursts followed by single shots. A firefight in progress. Claire started toward the stairs. "Wait," the guard began. She didn't wait. The stairwell was a tactical nightmare. Limited sight lines, multiple levels, echoes that made it impossible to pinpoint shooter locations. Claire took it one landing at a time, weapons sweeping the angles, waiting for movement. She found the first body on the 2nd floor landing. One of Carlisle's security team, 2 shots to the chest, dead before he hit the ground. The second body was 10 feet higher, another hostile, throat cut, weapon missing. Someone else was fighting back. Claire reached the 3rd floor and heard voices behind a reinforced door. She recognized Carlisle's clipped tones giving orders, coordinating defense. She knocked. 3 rapid, 2 slow. The recognition signal from her old unit. The door cracked open. One of Carlisle's tactical specialists, weapon trained on her face until he confirmed her identity. "Sergeant Morgan, get inside." The command center was cramped, filled with monitors showing security feeds from across the facility. Half the screens were dark. The ones still active showed armed figures moving through corridors, engaging in firefights with overwhelmed security personnel. Carlisle was at the main console, coordinating on 3 different radio channels simultaneously. "Need backup on the east wing. They're pushing toward the medical center." "Negative. All available units are engaged." "Then pull them from non-essential areas. I don't care about the perimeter if we lose the patients." She saw Claire held up one finger. "Wait." Claire used the time to scan the security feeds. She counted at least 12 hostiles, probably more in blind spots. They were organized, moving in coordinated teams, suppressing Carlisle's people with superior firepower, and they were advancing toward a specific location. Reed's recovery room. Claire pointed at the screen. "They're going for Reed." Carlisle finished her radio conversation, turned. "I know. We've got 4 guards with him, but they won't hold long against a concentrated assault." "Then we need to move him." "To where?" "They've got the building surrounded. We tried to evacuate but lost 2 transports before they cleared the garage." "What about air support?" 6 minutes out. We need to hold until then." Claire looked at the screens again, calculating angles and distances. "I can get to Reed. Buy you those 6 minutes." "Alone?" "I've done worse with less." Carlisle studied her face. "You're injured. You're running on adrenaline and pain medication. You go out there. You might not come back. Reed has the testimony that corroborates mine. If they kill him, Whitmore walks. If they kill you, same result." Then we make sure neither of us dies. Carlisle pulled out a tactical vest, handed it to Claire. Armor plates, extra magazines, flashbangs. There's a service corridor that runs parallel to the main hallway. Less exposed, but you'll have to move fast. Claire strapped on the vest, checked the magazines. What's the guard situation at Reed's room? 4 operators, good ones, but they're defensive. You'll need to be offensive. That I can do. The tactical specialist who'd let her in stepped forward. I'll go with her. No, Claire said. You're needed here. I work better alone anyway. It wasn't entirely true, but she didn't want anyone else dying because she'd decided to play hero. Carlisle grabbed her arm before she could leave. 6 minutes. That's all I need. You don't have to win. Just survive. I'll keep that in mind. The service corridor was narrow, dimly lit, filled with the hum of HVAC systems and the distant crack of gunfire. Claire moved quickly but carefully, weapon up, senses straining for any indication of hostile presence. She was halfway to Reed's position when she heard footsteps ahead. 2 people, moving fast, not bothering with stealth. She pressed into a maintenance alcove, made herself small, controlled her breathing. They passed within 3 feet of her position. 2 men in full tactical gear, weapons ready, moving with the confidence of people who thought they controlled the situation. Claire let them pass, then followed. They led her straight to a service entrance near Reed's recovery room. Through the door, she could hear suppressed gunfire and shouted commands. The assault had already begun. She keyed her radio. Carlisle, I'm at Reed's position. Hostiles are engaging the guards. How many? At least 6, maybe more. Can you hold? Claire looked through the small window in the service door, saw muzzle flashes, saw one of the guards go down, saw Reed's stretcher being moved toward the exit by someone who definitely wasn't medical staff. They're taking him, she said. Stop them. Claire didn't respond, just pushed through the door, weapon coming up, and started firing. The first hostile never saw her coming, dropped mid-step, weapon clattering. The second turned, bringing his rifle around. Claire put 2 rounds into his chest before he could complete the motion. The remaining 4 scattered, taking cover, returning fire. But Claire was already moving, using the chaos to close distance, keeping them reactive instead of proactive. She reached one of the surviving guards, a young woman with blood streaming from a shoulder wound, and dragged her behind an overturned medical cart. Reed? Claire asked. The guard pointed. They've got him. 3 men, heading for the rear exit. Claire looked, saw the stretcher disappearing through a doorway, saw the men carrying Reed moving with practiced efficiency. She had seconds. She grabbed a flashbang from her vest, pulled the pin, and threw it into the center of the remaining hostiles. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Claire was moving before the light faded, sprinting toward the rear exit, firing as she ran. 1 hostile down. 2. The third turned, weapon tracking her. She dove, rolled, came up shooting. He went down. But Reed was gone. Through the exit, into a loading area where an unmarked van was waiting with engine running. Claire hit the door at full speed, emerged into cold night air, saw the van starting to pull away. She fired at the tires. Missed. Fired again. 1 tire blew. The van swerved but didn't stop. Just accelerated on the rim, sparks flying, heading for the perimeter fence. Claire ran after it, knowing she couldn't catch it, knowing she had to try anyway. Then headlights blazed in front of her. A vehicle coming from the opposite direction, fast, angling to intercept the van. The 2 vehicles collided with a sound like the world ending. Claire kept running, weapon up, approaching the wreckage. The van's passenger door opened. A man stumbled out, dazed, bleeding. Claire put him down with 2 rounds. The driver's side was crumpled, the driver unconscious or dead. And in the back, strapped to the stretcher, Reed. Claire yanked open the rear doors, checked him, alive, unconscious. Multiple new injuries from the crash, but breathing. You're getting really expensive to keep alive, she muttered. The vehicle that had intercepted was military. She could see the markings now. And climbing out of the driver's seat, limping but functional, was one of Carlisle's tactical team. Sergeant Morgan, he said. Director Carlisle says air support is inbound. We need to secure a landing zone. Where? Parking lot, 200 meters north. Claire looked at Reed, at the stretcher, at the distance they needed to cover. Help me move him. They got Reed onto the stretcher and started moving, the tactical operator on one end, Claire on the other. Her ribs screamed with every step. Her concussion made the world tilt at odd angles. She ignored it all. Behind them, the building was still under assault. She could hear sustained gunfire, explosions, the sound of a battle that was far from over. They reached the parking lot just as the helicopter appeared, unmarked but clearly military, descending fast with landing lights blazing. The rotors kicked up debris. Claire shielded her eyes, kept moving, got Reed to the bird. Hands reached down, pulled the stretcher aboard. "Get in!" someone shouted. Claire turned to the tactical operator. "You coming? Someone needs to help Carlisle hold the building." "Then tell her." Gunfire erupted from the tree line. Rounds sparked off the helicopter's armored plating. The tactical operator returned fire, putting himself between Claire and the shooters. "Go!" he yelled. Claire climbed aboard, reached down to pull him up. He took 3 rounds to the chest, fell backward, didn't get up. "We're taking fire," the pilot shouted. "Need to go now." Claire looked at the fallen operator, at the building where Carlisle was still fighting, at the situation spiraling beyond any one person's ability to control. Then the helicopter was lifting, pulling away, and she was watching Walter Reed Medical Center recede into darkness while tracer rounds arced through the night sky. They flew north for 10 minutes before the pilot banked east, heading for what he said was a military airfield with proper security. Claire sat beside Reed, monitoring his vitals with equipment she only half remembered how to use. He was stable, barely, but alive. That had to be enough. Her radio crackled. Carlisle's voice, strained but controlled. "Morgan, you clear?" "Yeah, Reed's with me. We're heading to a secure location." "Good, because we've got a problem." "Bigger than an assault on a federal facility?" "Much bigger." Carlisle's voice was grim. "Whitmore just went public. He's holding a press conference right now, claiming we fabricated evidence against him, that Reed and you are part of a conspiracy to discredit military leadership. He's calling you both traitors." Claire felt something cold settle in her chest. "He can't do that. We have the drive. We have proof." "He's claiming the drive was planted, that we manufactured the evidence to justify a politically motivated prosecution. That's insane. No one will believe he's a 4-star general with 40 years of service and congressional allies. You're a disappeared soldier with no documented history for the last 3 years. Who do you think they'll believe?" Claire looked at Reed, unconscious and bleeding, at the notebook in her pocket with 43 names that deserved justice. "What do we do?" "You testify tomorrow, in front of Congress, on national television. You tell the truth, and you make them listen. They'll destroy me." "Probably, but you'll destroy Whitmore in the process. That's the trade." The helicopter banked again, descending toward lights that resolved into a military airfield. Claire watched the ground approach and thought about the quiet nurse who'd spent 3 years being nobody, who'd taken orders without question, who'd made herself invisible because visibility meant death. That woman was gone. What remained had to be enough to face down a general, a Congress, and a country that might not want to hear the truth. The helicopter touched down. Medical personnel rushed forward to take Reed, and standing at the edge of the landing pad, surrounded by federal agents and military police, was a man in an expensive suit with a congressional ID hanging from his neck. He approached as Claire climbed out of the helicopter. "Sergeant Morgan, I'm Senator Douglas Ramirez, Armed Services Committee. I need you to come with me." "Where?" "Washington. You're testifying in 8 hours. I need to clean up, prepare." "No time. Whitmore's already testified. He's painted a picture of a rogue operation, fabricated evidence, and soldiers acting without authority. If we don't counter that narrative immediately, it becomes truth." Claire looked at her blood-stained uniform, at her hands that still shook from adrenaline. "I'm not ready. You survived Kandahar. You survived tonight. You're as ready as you'll ever be." Ramirez gestured toward a waiting aircraft. "The question is whether you're willing." Claire thought about the notebook, about 43 soldiers, about Reed bleeding out because he'd tried to do the right thing, about the invisible nurse who'd learned that sometimes being seen meant being shot at, but being silent meant letting evil win. "I'm willing." "Good, because Whitmore's already on his way to Washington, and he's bringing witnesses, people who'll testify that you committed war crimes in Kandahar, that you're unstable, that everything you say is the product of trauma and delusion." "Is it true? Did I commit war crimes?" Ramirez looked at her carefully. "I've read the classified reports. I've seen what your unit faced, and I know that people who weren't there shouldn't judge people who were. But Whitmore will make it look as bad as possible. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to tell the truth. The truth is messy, especially in war. Then it'll be a messy testimony. Ramirez almost smiled. You'll do fine, Sergeant. Just remember, Whitmore has power, money, and allies. You have the truth. Make sure it's enough. They boarded the aircraft, a military transport configured for V-1P travel. Claire was given a seat, a bottle of water, and a briefing packet that outlined what she'd be facing. She read it during the flight to Washington, absorbing details that made her chest tighten with each page. Whitmore had witnesses claiming she'd executed prisoners, that she'd called in airstrikes on civilian positions, that she'd violated the Geneva Conventions repeatedly. None of it was true, but all of it was plausible enough to create reasonable doubt. Ramirez sat across from her, reviewing his own documents. You'll be under oath, he said without looking up. Anything you say can be used against you in criminal proceedings. Do you understand that? Yeah. And you're still willing to testify? Those 43 soldiers don't get a choice. I do. That makes me lucky. Ramirez looked up. You have an interesting definition of luck. I'm still breathing. That's luckier than most. The plane landed at Joint Base Andrews just before dawn. Claire was taken directly to a secure facility where lawyers, security specialists, and congressional staffers swarmed her with questions, advice, and warnings that all blurred together into white noise. She answered what she could, ignored the rest. Finally, Carlisle arrived, looking like she'd been through a war, which Claire supposed she had. Status? Claire asked. We held Walter Reed, 12 hostiles killed or captured, 3 of our people dead, 6 wounded. Carlisle sat heavily. But we held. The evidence? Secure. Reed's testimony is recorded and authenticated. Even if something happens to him, we have his statement. And me, you're the corroborating witness. The soldier who was there. The person who can confirm that everything on that drive is true. Carlisle met her eyes. No pressure. When do I testify? 2 hours. Senate Armed Services Committee. Closed session, but it'll be leaked within minutes. By tonight, the whole country will know your name. Great. Whitmore testified for 3 hours yesterday. He was calm, confident, convincing. He painted himself as a dedicated public servant being targeted by political enemies. He cried when he talked about the soldiers who died under his command. Did he mention the soldiers who died because of his orders? No, that's your job. A staffer appeared in the doorway. Sergeant Morgan, they're ready for you. Claire stood, straightened her uniform, a fresh one they'd provided, medals and ribbons in place, everything regulation. She looked like a soldier. Now she had to sound like one. Carlisle walked with her to the Senate hearing room, through corridors filled with reporters and cameras that were being kept at a distance by federal marshals. At the entrance, Carlisle stopped. Last chance to walk away, she said quietly. We both know that's not true. No, but I had to offer. Carlisle handed her a small object, Reed's notebook. He wanted you to have this. Said you'd know what to do with it. Claire took the notebook, felt the weight of 43 names in her hand. One more thing, Carlisle said. Whitmore's lawyer is going to come after you hard. Personal attacks, character assassination, anything to make you look unreliable. Don't let him rattle you. I've been shot at by professionals. I think I can handle a lawyer. Bullets are easier. They don't twist your words. The doors opened. The Senate Armed Services Committee chamber was smaller than Claire expected, more intimate, which somehow made it worse. 15 senators sat in a semicircle, looking down at a single chair where she was expected to sit and explain how she'd survived when 8 others hadn't. Senator Ramirez was there, along with faces she recognized from news coverage and faces she didn't. And sitting in the gallery, surrounded by lawyers and aides, was General Marcus Whitmore. He looked exactly like his photograph. Distinguished, confident, every inch the decorated warrior. He was also looking at her with an expression that promised destruction. Claire took her seat. The committee chairman, an older man with steel gray hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile, leaned forward. State your name for the record. Sergeant Claire Morgan, serial number 839-42-7756, 75th Ranger Regiment, attached Special Operations Task Force. Sergeant Morgan, you're here to provide testimony regarding allegations of misconduct by General Marcus Whitmore. Do you understand the gravity of these allegations? Yes, sir. And you understand that you're under oath, that perjury is a federal crime? Yes, sir. Then let's begin. He glanced at his notes. On October 7th, 3 years ago, your unit was conducting operations in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Can you describe what happened? Claire took a breath. This was it. The moment she'd been running from for 3 years. The moment that defined whether 43 soldiers died for nothing or whether their deaths meant something. She opened her mouth to speak, and the chamber doors burst open. Federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, moving with tactical precision. Nobody move! This is a federal raid. We have warrants for the arrest of... The lead agent stopped, stared at the room full of senators. Someone had made a catastrophic mistake. And as Claire watched the chaos unfold, as senators shouted and agents tried to figure out what was happening, she saw Whitmore stand slowly in the gallery. He wasn't panicking, he was smiling, because whoever had sent those agents hadn't made a mistake. They'd just given him exactly what he needed. Proof that the prosecution was desperate, that they'd resort to theatrical stunts, that everything Claire was about to say was part of a coordinated attack by people willing to violate Senate procedures to get their way. And as the agents were escorted out by Senate security, as the chairman called for order, as cameras that weren't supposed to be there captured every second, Claire realized she'd just lost before she'd said a single word. The chairman's gavel came down like a gunshot, 3 sharp cracks that cut through the chaos. This chamber will come to order immediately. The federal agents were already being escorted out by Senate security, faces red with confusion and anger. In the gallery, Whitmore had returned to his seat, expression carefully neutral now, but Claire had seen that smile, had seen the calculation behind it. He'd known they were coming. The chairman waited until the doors closed before speaking again, voice tight with barely controlled fury. Someone want to explain what just happened? Senator Ramirez was on his feet. Mr. Chairman, I had no knowledge of any federal operation. This committee was not informed. Clearly, the chairman's eyes swept the room. We're in recess until I get answers. Sergeant Morgan, you'll remain available. Sir, if I could just... You're dismissed, Sergeant. Claire stood slowly, every eye in the room on her, knowing exactly how this looked, knowing that the optics had just shifted from courageous whistleblower to desperate conspirator. Carlyle met her in the hallway, face carved from stone. That wasn't us, she said immediately. Someone sent those agents, but it didn't come through proper channels. Then who? I don't know, but Whitmore did. You saw his face. Claire had, and that was the part that worried her most. They were taken to a secure room where Ramirez was already on the phone, voice sharp with accusation. I don't care what the warrant said. You don't raid a Senate hearing without coordinating with... He listened, face darkening. That's impossible. Director Carlyle is standing right here, and she didn't authorize... Another pause. Find out who did. Now. He hung up, turned to them. The warrant was issued under Carlyle's name. Digital signature, proper authorization codes. Everything by the book. That's impossible, Carlyle said. I never issued any such... I know, which means someone has access to your credentials. Someone who wanted to make this look like a coordinated attack on Whitmore. Ramirez dropped into a chair. And it worked. Half the committee thinks you're running a vendetta. The other half doesn't know what to think. What about the evidence? Claire asked. The drive. Reed's testimony. Compromised by the perception that we're willing to break rules to get Whitmore. Doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is how it looks. Claire felt the walls closing in. So we just lost. We lost the first round. Ramirez pulled out his tablet, started scrolling through documents. But there's still a second round if we can get it. How? By figuring out who sent those agents and why. Because someone wanted to sabotage this hearing, and I'm betting it wasn't Whitmore directly. Too risky, too traceable. He looked up, which means he has someone on the inside, someone with high-level access who can manipulate federal operations. Carlyle's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression shifting from anger to something colder. Understood. Send me everything you have. She hung up, looked at Claire and Ramirez. That was my deputy. He's been digging into the agent deployment. The order came from the Department of Defense, Office of the Inspector General, issued by Assistant Inspector General Victoria Hammond. Hammond? Ramirez stood. She's been with the IG's office for 15 years. Spotless record. Not spotless enough. Carlisle pulled up a file on her phone, turned it so they could see. Financial records, bank transfers. She's been receiving payments from a consulting firm that's a known front for defense contractors, including several that have direct contracts with Whitmore's company. That's not proof of coordination, Ramirez said. Corruption, maybe, but not proof she's working with Whitmore. Then we get proof. Claire stood. Where is she now? DOD headquarters. But you can't just watch me. Carlisle grabbed her arm. Think, Sergeant. You storm into the Pentagon looking for revenge. You play into exactly the narrative Whitmore's building. Unstable soldier, acting without authority. Then what do you suggest? We use the system. Ramirez subpoenas her. We bring her in front of the committee. We let her lie under oath, and then we prove she's lying. That takes time. Time Whitmore's using to destroy our credibility. I know. Carlisle's grip tightened. But we do this right, or we don't do it at all. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to tear out of the building and make Hammond talk the way soldiers made people talk when lives were on the line. But she wasn't in a war zone anymore. She was in Washington, where the rules were different even if the stakes weren't. Fine, we do it your way. But if it doesn't work, we'll revisit your way. Carlisle released her arm. But right now, we play this smart. Ramirez was already drafting the subpoena, fingers moving across his tablet with practiced speed. I can have her in front of the committee by this afternoon. Emergency session, claims of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, potential coordination with a subject of investigation. Will the chairman allow it? He will if I can prove there's merit. Ramirez looked at Carlisle. I need everything you have on Hammond. Financial records, communications logs, travel history, anything that shows a pattern. You'll have it in an hour. Make it 30 minutes. Whitmore's lawyers are already filing motions to dismiss the investigation. If we don't move fast, he'll bury this before we can respond. They split up. Carlisle to gather evidence, Ramirez to coordinate with the committee, Claire to a secure room where she was supposed to wait and let other people handle the fight. She lasted 10 minutes before pulling out her phone and calling the one person who might have answers. Reed picked up on the third ring, voice weak but alert. Morgan. Heard the hearing went sideways. That's one way to put it. You doing okay? I'm alive, which is more than I expected yesterday. He coughed, and Claire heard medical equipment beeping in the background. What do you need? Victoria Hammond, Assistant Inspector General. You know her? Know of her. Career bureaucrat, smart, connected. Why? Because she's the one who sent the agents to raid the hearing, and she's on Whitmore's payroll. Reed was quiet for a moment. You sure? Carlisle has bank records, payments from one of Whitmore's front companies. Then she's not just connected, she's the linchpin. Whitmore doesn't get his hands dirty. He uses people like Hammond to do the work while he maintains plausible deniability. So if we flip her, you won't. People at her level don't flip. They've got too much to lose and too many protections built in. Reed paused. But if you can prove she coordinated with Whitmore directly, you don't need her testimony. You just need the evidence. Which we don't have. Not yet. But I know someone who might. Who? Major David Sullivan, Army CID. He's been investigating corruption in the procurement system for 2 years. If Hammond's involved with Whitmore's contracts, Sullivan's probably already got a file on her. Can you reach him? I can try. But Morgan, if Sullivan has evidence, it's classified. You can't just walk in and demand it. Then I'll ask nicely. That's what I'm afraid of. Claire hung up and immediately dialed the number Reed texted her. It rang 4 times before a brusque voice answered. Sullivan. Major Sullivan, my name is Sergeant Claire Morgan. Commander Reed suggested I call you. Reed? How is he? Recovering. He said you might be able to help with an investigation. What kind of investigation? The kind involving Assistant Inspector General Victoria Hammond and General Marcus Whitmore. The line went silent. Then, where are you right now? Washington. Secure facility near the Capitol. Stay there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. Claire sat in the empty room, staring at her phone, wondering if she'd just made things better or catastrophically worse. Major David Sullivan arrived in 15 minutes, not 20. He was mid-40s, compact and intense, with the look of someone who'd spent a career digging through paperwork to find the one lie that unraveled everything. He sat across from Claire, pulled out a laptop, and didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're testifying against Whitmore." "Was. Before the hearing got raided, I heard. Hammond's work. She's been cleaning up after Whitmore for years." He opened a file, spun the laptop so Claire could see. "I've been building a case on procurement fraud. Whitmore's company has been winning contracts they shouldn't win, delivering equipment that doesn't meet specs, and billing for services never rendered. Total fraud amounts to somewhere north of $3 billion. Claire stared at the numbers. $3 billion? Conservative estimate. Could be double that. Sullivan pulled up another file. Hammond's been facilitating it, approving contracts that should never have been approved, blocking investigations that got too close. She's not just on Whitmore's payroll, she's essential to his operation. Can you prove it? I can prove the fraud. What I can't prove is the direct connection to Whitmore. He's insulated, uses cutouts, shell companies, encrypted communications. Everything leads to his subordinates, never to him personally. So he walks. Unless someone can connect the dots, someone who has access to operational communications, someone who was there when orders were given. Sullivan looked at her carefully. Someone like you. I was a medic. I wasn't in command meetings, but you were attached to special operations. You had clearance. You were present during briefings. He pulled up another document, including a briefing on October 4th, 3 days before Kandahar, a briefing where operational parameters were discussed and approved. Claire's memory dragged her back to that day, to a 10 in Kandahar, heat making the air shimmer, officers reviewing maps and timelines. I was there for medical planning. I didn't... You signed the operational order right here. Sullivan pointed at a digital signature on the document, which means you're a witness to the conversation that happened before that signature, to who said what, to who gave the orders that resulted in your unit being left without air support. I don't remember. Yes, you do. You just haven't thought about it in 3 years because thinking about it means reliving the worst day of your life. Sullivan's voice softened slightly. But if you can remember who was in that tent, what they said, who objected, and who didn't, that's the connection we need. Claire closed her eyes, forced herself back to that briefing. It had been routine, standard operational review. Except there was a civilian, she said slowly, not military. He was introduced as a liaison from the contracting office. He didn't say much, just listened. Do you remember his name? No, but he had a scar, right here. She touched her left eyebrow, and he kept checking his phone like he was relaying information to someone. Sullivan pulled up a photo. This him? Claire looked at the face on the screen, older than she remembered, but the scar was unmistakable. Yeah, that's him, Thomas Brennan, Senior VP of Whitmore Defense Solutions. And he was in that briefing? Yes. Did he participate in the discussion about air support? Claire thought back. He asked about the timeline, about when the convoy would be most vulnerable. And what did the briefing officer say? That there was a 2-hour window where we'd be exposed, that we'd need air cover during that time or we should adjust the route. And did you adjust? No, we proceeded as planned, with assurances that air support would be available. Who gave those assurances? Claire's chest tightened because she remembered now. Remembered the voice, the confidence, the absolute certainty. Whitmore. He was on the call. Said air assets were allocated and would be on station. And they weren't. No, they were pulled 2 hours before we needed them. We were told it was a priority shift, that another unit needed immediate support. Except there was no other unit, Sullivan said quietly. I've been through the flight logs. The aircraft designated for your support were redirected to a holding pattern over Bagram. They never engaged anywhere else that day. So they were pulled deliberately. They were pulled because someone wanted your unit exposed, and I'm betting that someone was in communication with Brennan during your operation. Sullivan pulled up communications metadata. Times, numbers, durations. Brennan made 17 calls during your 8-hour operation, 12 of them to a number registered to a burner phone. That phone pinged off a cell tower in Northern Virginia, less than 3 miles from Whitmore's residence. Claire felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, not vindication. Just the cold certainty that what she'd suspected for 3 years was finally provable. Can you trace those calls? Already did. Can't get content. They were encrypted, but I can prove they happened, and I can prove Brennan was getting real-time updates on your position. From who? From someone on your operational chain, someone who had access to tactical communications and was feeding them to a civilian contractor. That's treason. That's what we're going to prove. Sullivan closed the laptop. I'm testifying this afternoon. Ramirez fast-tracked my appearance. I'm going to lay out the procurement fraud, the communications pattern, and the connection to your unit's casualties. Will it be enough? Depends on whether Hammond breaks. If she realizes we have proof of her coordination with Brennan, she might cut a deal. And if she doesn't, then we go with what we have and hope the committee sees the pattern. Sullivan stood. But I need you in that chamber. I need you to confirm the briefing, confirm Brennan's presence, confirm Whitmore's assurances. Can you do that? Claire thought about the invisible nurse who'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this moment. Then she thought about 43 names in a notebook. Yeah, I can do that. The committee reconvened at 2 p.m., the chamber packed with staffers, lawyers, and journalists who'd somehow gotten access despite the closed session designation. Claire sat at the witness table beside Sullivan, Carlyle behind them, Ramirez conferring with the chairman. Whitmore was still in the gallery, but his confident posture had shifted slightly. He was watching Sullivan with the kind of attention that came from recognizing a threat. The chairman called the session to order. We're resuming these proceedings with testimony from Major David Sullivan, U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. Major Sullivan, you're here to present evidence related to procurement fraud allegations. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And to evidence connecting that fraud to the events of October 7th in Kandahar Province. Whitmore's lawyer stood immediately. Objection. This hearing is about allegations against General Whitmore, not broad procurement issues. The two are connected, Sullivan said, and I can prove it. The chairman gestured for him to continue. Sullivan laid it out methodically. The contracts, the fraud, the payments to Hammond, the communications between Brennan and the unknown phone, the timeline that showed calls happening during the exact window when air support was pulled from Claire's unit. He spoke for 40 minutes without interruption, building a case that was damning in its detail. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Then Whitmore's lawyer stood again. This is all circumstantial. You have communications metadata, but no content. You have proximity, but no proof of coordination. And you're asking this committee to believe that a decorated general orchestrated the death of American soldiers based on phone records and financial transactions that could have a dozen innocent explanations. I'm asking this committee to look at the pattern, Sullivan replied, at the money, the communications, the outcomes, and ask themselves if this looks like coincidence or conspiracy. It looks like a witch hunt. Then let's test that theory. Sullivan pulled out a document. I subpoenaed Assistant Inspector General Hammond's phone records this morning. She's made 47 calls in the last 72 hours, 22 of them to the same burner phone number that Brennan was calling 3 years ago. The chamber erupted. The chairman's gavel came down repeatedly, restoring order by force of will. Major Sullivan, are you suggesting that Hammond is currently coordinating with Whitmore's associates? I'm suggesting that the pattern hasn't changed, that the same people who orchestrated the Kandahar incident are still operating, still coordinating, still trying to control the narrative. Ramirez stood. Mr. Chairman, I move that we subpoena Assistant Inspector General Hammond immediately. If she's coordinating with subjects of this investigation, she needs to answer for it. Seconded, another senator called. The chairman looked at Whitmore's lawyer. Counselor, does your client have any objection to Ms. Hammond testifying? The lawyer hesitated, and in that hesitation, Claire saw everything. Because if Whitmore objected, it looked like he had something to hide. If he didn't object, Hammond might break under questioning. No objection, the lawyer said finally. My client welcomes any testimony that clarifies the facts. Then we're in recess until Ms. Hammond can be brought before this committee. The chairman stood. 2 hours. Be ready to resume at 4 p.m. Claire stood, caught Carlyle's eye. They're going to get to her first, Claire said quietly. Whitmore's people. They're going to make sure she doesn't talk. We've got federal marshals bringing her in. She'll be secure. You said the same thing about Walter Reed. Carlyle's expression darkened. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we don't wait for them to make a move. We make ours first. Meaning? Claire looked at Sullivan. Where does Hammond live? Bethesda. But you can't. I'm not going to her house. I'm going to her office. Because if she's been coordinating with Whitmore for years, she's got records, communications, something she kept as insurance in case Whitmore turned on her. That's speculation, Carlyle said. No, that's tradecraft. She's been in intelligence and oversight long enough to know that the people you protect today might destroy you tomorrow. She's got an insurance policy. We just need to find it before they destroy it. Sullivan was already on his phone. I can get authorization to search her office, but it'll take time. How much time? An hour, maybe 2? We don't have 2 hours. Claire turned to Carlyle. Can you get us in? Into the office of the Inspector General? Without a warrant? No, absolutely not. Then I guess I'm going in without authorization. Morgan. But Claire was already moving toward the exit, knowing exactly how reckless this was, knowing exactly how many rules she was about to break, and not caring, because somewhere in Hammond's office was the proof they needed, the connection that turned circumstantial evidence into an airtight case. And if she had to violate federal law to find it, that was a price she was willing to pay. Carlyle caught up to her in the hallway. You're going to get arrested. Probably. And destroy any credibility you have left. Maybe. So why do it? Claire stopped, turned to face her. Because 3 years ago, I watched good people die while I hid in a drainage ditch. I watched them bleed out because someone decided they were acceptable casualties in someone else's war. And I've spent every day since then being invisible, being quiet, being safe. She took a breath. I'm done being safe. If Hammond has proof that Whitmore killed those soldiers, I'm getting it, even if it costs me everything. Carlyle stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Director Carlyle, authorization code Delta 7905. I need immediate access to the DoD Inspector General's office, room 4E726. Federal Investigation Priority 1. She listened. I don't care if she's not there. Open it anyway. She hung up, looked at Claire. You've got 30 minutes before someone notices and shuts us down. Make them count. They took Carlyle's vehicle, lights and sirens clearing traffic, arriving at the Pentagon in 12 minutes. Security tried to slow them down, but Carlyle's credentials and attitude got them through. Hammond's office was on the 4th floor, East Wing, a bureaucratic space that looked like every other mid-level government office Claire had ever seen, except for the wall safe behind the photograph of Hammond shaking hands with the Secretary of Defense. There, Claire said, pointing. That's going to be encrypted, biometric lock, probably combination as well. Then we find the combination. They tore through the office systematically, drawers, files, computer terminals that required passwords they didn't have. Claire was starting to think they'd made a massive mistake when she found it. A handwritten note taped to the bottom of Hammond's desk drawer. Just 6 numbers. Got it. She tried the combination. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 items. A burner phone, a USB drive, and a handwritten ledger. Claire grabbed all 3. Let's go. They made it back to the vehicle before security caught up, made it out of the Pentagon complex before the lockdown order came through. And by the time they reached the Capitol, Claire had listened to 3 voice messages on the burner phone that proved everything. Whitmore's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. Giving Hammond instructions to delay the investigation, to redirect the agents, to make sure Claire's testimony never happened. You were right, Carlyle said quietly. She kept insurance. Now we use it. The committee reconvened at 4 p.m. Hammond was there, flanked by lawyers, looking like someone who knew the walls were closing in but wasn't sure from which direction. The chairman started with standard questions. Her role, her responsibilities, her relationship to the investigation. Hammond answered carefully, admitting nothing, denying nothing. Then Ramirez stood. Ms. Hammond, do you own a phone with the number 202-555-7392? Hammond's face went pale. I don't recall. Let me refresh your memory. Ramirez held up the burner phone. This phone was found in your office safe less than 2 hours ago. It contained 17 voice messages. Would you like to hear them? Hammond's lawyer immediately objected, but the chairman overruled him. The first message played over the chamber's sound system. Whitmore's voice, calm and controlled. Victoria, we have a problem. The Morgan woman is testifying tomorrow. I need you to delay it. Use whatever resources necessary. The second message. The agents are authorized. Make it look legitimate. Make it look like Carlisle's operation went rogue. The third message? If this doesn't work, we'll need to consider more permanent solutions. Are you prepared for that? The chamber exploded. Senators shouting questions, lawyers objecting. Whitmore on his feet, face red, screaming that the recordings were fabricated. But Claire was watching Hammond, watching her realize that her insurance policy had just become the prosecution's smoking gun, watching her understand that loyalty to Whitmore had just destroyed her life, and watching her make the calculation every trapped operative eventually made. Hammond stood, silenced her lawyer with a gesture, and looked directly at the chairman. I want immunity, full immunity from prosecution, and witness protection. You can't... Whitmore's lawyer started. In exchange, Hammond continued, voice steady now, I'll provide testimony and documentation proving that General Marcus Whitmore orchestrated the deaths of 43 American soldiers over a 3-year period, that he manipulated intelligence, redirected military assets, and profited from defense contracts obtained through fraud and murder. The chamber went absolutely silent. Whitmore was still standing, but his face had gone gray because his fixer had just turned, and everything he'd built was about to collapse. The chairman's gavel came down one final time. This committee is adjourned pending transfer of Ms. Hammond into federal custody and review of all evidence. General Whitmore, you are hereby ordered to surrender your passport and remain available for further questioning. Claire stood, legs shaking from adrenaline, watching as federal marshals moved to take Hammond into protective custody. Watching as Whitmore's lawyers swarmed him, already planning the defense that wouldn't save him. Watching as Ramirez caught her eye and nodded once. They'd done it. But as Claire turned to leave, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Whitmore, being escorted out by his security detail, looked back at her one final time and smiled. Not the smile of a defeated man, the smile of someone who still had one card left to play. Claire didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that smile. The one that said Whitmore wasn't finished. That Hammond's testimony was just the opening act in something larger. She was in the secure facility reviewing Hammond's documentation when Carlisle found her at 3 a.m., 2 cups of coffee in hand. You need rest. I need to understand what he's planning. Claire didn't look up from the ledger. Hammond gave us procurement fraud, communications, coordination, but Whitmore looked like someone who just won, not lost. Carlisle set down the coffee. Maybe he's delusional. Powerful men don't handle failure well. He's not delusional. He's strategic. Claire pointed at an entry in the ledger. Look at this. Payment to a shell company 3 days ago. $2 million. Why move that kind of money right before everything collapses? Could be anything. Legal fees, relocation funds, or payment for something he needs done. Claire pulled out her phone, called Sullivan. He answered immediately, sounding like he hadn't slept either. Morgan, what have you got? A payment. $2 million to a company called Arcturus Solutions. You heard of them? He's clicking in the background. Yeah, private security contractor, former special operations types. They do executive protection, hostile environment work. Pause. And occasionally things that aren't strictly legal. Claire's chest tightened. What kind of things? Witness elimination. Evidence destruction, making problems disappear. More clicking. Arcturus has a team in the D.C. area, arrived 2 days ago according to hotel records. How many? 8 personnel, military background, all of them, carrying diplomatic credentials that are probably forged. Claire stood. Where's Hammond? Federal detention, witness protection protocols, why? Because she's the only person who can testify to direct coordination if something happens to her. Her written statement still stands. The recordings can be challenged as fabricated. Her lawyers will claim duress, manipulation, but if she's alive to testify under oath, in public, Whitmore's finished. Claire grabbed her jacket. We need to move her, now. Morgan, she's in federal custody. She's protected. So was Reed, so was I. Whitmore doesn't care about protocols. He cares about winning. Carlisle was already on her phone calling the U.S. Marshals Service. This is Director Carlisle. I need to verify security on a witness in protective custody. Victoria Hammond. She listened, face going pale. When did this happen? She hung up, looked at Claire. Hammond's dead, found in her cell 20 minutes ago. Apparent suicide. The word hung in the air like smoke. Claire felt something cold and familiar settle in her chest. The same feeling she'd had in Kandahar when air support never came, when she realized they'd been abandoned. It wasn't suicide. The marshals said she hanged herself with a bedsheet. No signs of struggle. Then someone got to her before she could testify publicly, someone who had access to a federal detention facility. Claire's hands clenched. Whitmore's cleaning house. Sullivan's voice came through the phone, still on speaker. If Hammond's gone, our case just got weaker. Her statement helps, but defense lawyers will tear it apart without her there to defend it. What about the recordings? Carlisle asked. Authentication will be challenged. They'll claim deep fakes, manipulation, anything to create reasonable doubt. So we're back where we started. No. Claire's voice was steady. We're exactly where Whitmore wanted us. Hammond was supposed to be our smoking gun. He let us find her evidence, let her flip, knowing he could eliminate her before trial. Then what do we do? Claire thought about 43 soldiers, about 3 years of running, about the invisible nurse who'd learned that sometimes the quietest person in the room was the most dangerous. We give him what he wants. Me. Alone. Vulnerable. And when he makes his move, we end this. Absolutely not, Carlisle said immediately. You're not bait. I'm the only witness left who can connect Kandahar to Whitmore's orders. I was in that briefing. I heard his assurances. I watched my unit die because of his decisions. Claire met her eyes. I'm already the target. We just make it official. Sullivan's voice. What are you proposing? I go public. Tomorrow, press conference. I tell everything. Kandahar, the briefing, Whitmore's assurances, the abandonment. I make myself the story. That paints a target on your back, Carlisle said. The target's already there. I'm just making it visible. Claire pulled up a map on her tablet. Whitmore can't let me testify publicly. Can't risk cross-examination. Can't risk me being credible. He'll send Arcturus to eliminate the problem before trial. So we protect you? No. We let them try. And we catch them in the act. Carlisle understood immediately. That's entrapment. That's justice. They come for me. We have evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. We have Whitmore's payment to Arcturus. We have attempted assassination of a federal witness. That's not circumstantial. That's ironclad. It's also incredibly dangerous. Everything about this has been dangerous. Claire stood. But I'm done hiding, done being quiet. I'm going to stand in front of cameras and tell the truth. And when Whitmore sends his people to stop me, we'll be ready. Sullivan was quiet for a moment. I can coordinate with FBI, set up surveillance, tactical response. But Morgan, these are professionals. If something goes wrong, then I die doing something that matters instead of hiding in a hospital pretending to be someone else. Carlisle looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, we do this your way, but we do it smart. Full protective detail, counter-surveillance, multiple fallback positions. Fine, but it has to look real. Has to look like I'm exposed. Trust me, Carlisle said grimly. After what you're about to say, you'll be the most exposed person in America. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the National Press Club. Claire stood backstage watching reporters file in, cameras being positioned, the machinery of media attention grinding to life. Ramirez appeared at her shoulder. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way. Not anymore. You know what happens after this? Your life becomes public property. Every decision you've ever made, every mistake, every moment you're not proud of, it all gets examined and judged. I've been judged my whole career, by commanders who didn't see me, by doctors who dismissed me, by a system that valued appearances over substance. Claire adjusted her uniform. At least this time I'm choosing what I'm judged for. Just remember, you don't owe them everything. You don't have to bare your soul to prove you're telling the truth. Yes, I do. Because Hammond's dead, Reed's injured, I'm all that's left. She looked at Ramirez. Those 43 soldiers deserve someone willing to stand up and be counted, even if it costs me everything. Ramirez nodded, stepped back. Claire walked onto the stage. The cameras flashed like gunfire. Questions shouted from every direction. She waited for silence, found it eventually, and began. My name is Sergeant Claire Morgan. 3 years ago, I was part of a special operations unit in Kandahar province. On October 7th, 8 members of my unit were killed in an ambush. I survived by hiding in a drainage ditch while my friends died around me. She let that sink in, let the cameras capture the weight of it. For 3 years, I've been told their deaths were the result of intelligence failure, bad timing, the fog of war. But that's not true. Those soldiers died because someone made a decision that their lives were acceptable casualties. That decision was made by General Marcus Whitmore. The room erupted. Claire waited it out. 3 days before the ambush, I was present at a mission briefing where Whitmore personally assured our unit that air support would be available during our operation. He specified the timeline, the assets, the coordination. We trusted those assurances. We proceeded into hostile territory based on that trust. Her voice stayed level, factual. To 2 hours before we needed that support, it was pulled. No explanation, no alternative, just silence when we called for help. And 8 soldiers died because air cover never came. She pulled out Reed's notebook, held it up. These are the names of soldiers who died under similar circumstances. 43 names. 43 families who were told their loved ones died serving their country, when the truth is they died serving someone's profit margin. The questions came fast and aggressive. Claire answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and maintained the composure that came from knowing every word was being weaponized, even as she spoke it. After 30 minutes, Ramirez stepped in and ended it. But the damage, or the progress, depending on perspective, was done. By noon, Claire's face was on every news channel. By 2 p.m., Whitmore's lawyers had released a statement calling her testimony defamatory and promising legal action. By 4 p.m., the internet had done what the internet does, turned her into both hero and villain simultaneously. Claire watched it all from the secure facility, surrounded by federal agents and surveillance equipment, waiting for Arcturus to make their move. It came at 8 p.m. Motion sensors triggered around the perimeter. Thermal imaging caught 4 figures approaching from different vectors. Professional, coordinated. Carlisle's voice crackled over the radio. All units, we have multiple hostiles inbound. Sergeant Morgan, stay in the safe room. Claire ignored that instruction, grabbed the weapon she'd been given, and moved to a position where she could see the main entrance. Because if they wanted her, they were going to have to work for it. The attack was surgical. Shaped charges on 2 entry points, flashbangs for suppression, then armed personnel moving through the building with the efficiency of people who'd done this hundreds of times. But they weren't expecting the federal response. FBI tactical teams hit them from 3 directions, caught them in a crossfire, pinned them down in the main corridor. Claire watched through security monitors as the Arcturus team tried to fight their way out, tried to retreat, and finally realized they were trapped. 3 surrendered immediately. The 4th tried to fight and was taken down non-lethally. It was over in 90 seconds. Carlisle appeared on the monitors, coordinating the arrest, securing evidence. And when FBI agents searched the detained men, they found mission orders, encrypted communications, and a payment authorization signed by an account traced directly to Whitmore's personal holdings. Not a shell company, not a cutout. His actual account. He'd gotten sloppy, desperate, and it had just destroyed him. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Whitmore's defense team tried everything, challenged evidence, attacked credibility, painted Claire as a traumatized veteran whose testimony couldn't be trusted. But the evidence was overwhelming. Hammond's recordings, Sullivan's financial documentation, the Arcturus team's testimony after they cut deals, and Claire's first-hand account of the briefing, corroborated by operational records that showed exactly what Whitmore had promised and exactly what he'd failed to deliver. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, fraud, murder for hire, 43 counts of negligent homicide in the deaths of American service members. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Life in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Claire wasn't in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She'd said her piece, told her truth. What happened after wasn't about her anymore. She was in Chicago, standing outside Silverline General Hospital, looking at the ER entrance where this had all started. Dr. Cole found her there. "Heard you won," he said. "Justice won. I just testified. That's not how the news is covering it. You're being called a hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who stopped running." Cole was quiet for a moment. "The job offer still stands, if you want it." Claire smiled. "I don't think Claire Bennett exists anymore." "Then come back as Claire Morgan. We could use someone with your skills, and this time I promise to actually appreciate them. I appreciate that, really, but I think I'm done being invisible. What will you do? Claire pulled out a business card Carlisle had given her. Consulting position, training role, teaching soldiers and medical personnel how to recognize when orders didn't make sense, when authority was being abused, when speaking up might save lives. I'm going to make sure what happened to my unit doesn't happen to anyone else. That's a hard road. Easier than hiding. Cole extended his hand. Claire shook it. For what it's worth, he said, you were a good nurse, but I think you'll be a better advocate. I hope so. She turned to leave, then stopped. Dr. Cole, that day in the trauma bay, when you told me to get out, you were right to be angry. I did cross a line. You saved a man's life. I broke protocol. Protocol isn't worth much when someone's dying. Cole smiled slightly. Took me a while to understand that. Thank you for the lesson. Claire walked away from Silverline General for the last time, got into the waiting car where Carlisle sat reviewing files. Ready? Carlisle asked. Yeah. They drove to Walter Reed, where Reed was in physical therapy, regaining strength stolen by bullets and betrayal. He looked up when Claire entered, smiled. Heard Whitmore got life. He did. Good. Reed set down the weights he'd been lifting. What about you? What's next? Carlisle offered me a position, training and advocacy, making sure soldiers know they don't have to follow illegal orders, that they have rights even in the military. You'll be good at that. I'll try. Reed pulled out a worn envelope. Found this in my gear. Was going to give it to you earlier, but timing never seemed right. Claire opened it. Inside was a photograph. Her old unit, all 9 of them, taken a week before Kandahar. Young faces, confident smiles, people who trusted the system to protect them. I can't look at this, she said quietly. You have to, because they're why you fought, why you testified, why you refused to stay silent. Reed's voice was gentle. They died. You didn't, and you just made sure their deaths meant something. That takes courage most people don't have. Claire studied the photograph, saw faces she remembered, names she'd memorized, lives that had been taken for profit and covered up by power. I should have died with them. Maybe. But you didn't. And you just spent 3 years punishing yourself for surviving. Reed stood, steady despite his injuries. You think they'd want that? You think those soldiers would want you to spend your life hiding and feeling guilty? I don't know what they'd want. They'd want you to live, to fight, to make sure it mattered. He put a hand on her shoulder. You did that. You won. Now you need to figure out what winning actually means. Claire looked at the photograph one more time, then carefully folded it and put it in her pocket. It means I stopped being invisible. Yeah, it does. 6 months later, Claire stood in front of a room full of young soldiers at Fort Benning, teaching a class on ethical decision-making in combat situations. She didn't hide who she was, didn't minimize what had happened, just told the truth about Kandahar, about the choices she'd made, about the cost of silence and the value of speaking up. The soldiers listened, asked hard questions, challenged her assumptions. It was exactly what she'd hoped for. After class, a young private approached her. 22, maybe 23, nervous but determined. Sergeant Morgan, can I ask you something? Sure. How did you know when to speak up? How did you know it was worth risking everything? Claire thought about that question, about the invisible nurse, about the soldier who'd hidden for 3 years, about the woman who'd finally stopped running. I didn't know, not for sure, but I knew staying silent was killing me, and I knew the people who died deserved better than my fear. She met the private's eyes. Speaking up might cost you, but staying silent costs you too. You just have to decide which price you're willing to pay. The private nodded, walked away thinking about that answer. Claire packed up her materials, headed for the parking lot where Carlisle was waiting. How'd it go? Carlisle asked. Good. They're learning, questioning, that's all I can ask. You're good at this, better than anyone expected. I had good teachers. They just didn't know they were teaching me. They drove back toward Washington, traffic heavy but moving. There's something you should know, Carlisle said. The families of the soldiers who died, The 43. They're organizing a memorial, and they want you there. Claire's chest tightened. I don't know if I can face them. They don't want confrontation. They want to thank you for fighting when no one else would, for making sure their children, their spouses, their parents, that they didn't die for nothing. I didn't do it for thanks. I know, but take them anyway, because they need to give it, and you need to accept that you deserve it. The memorial was held on a clear Saturday at Arlington National Cemetery. 43 families gathered around a monument that listed every name, every rank, every date of death. Claire stood at the back, trying to remain unnoticed. But one by one, family members approached her, shook her hand, thanked her, told her about the soldiers she'd fought for, about their lives, their dreams, their final letters home. And Claire listened, absorbed their stories, carried their grief alongside her own. When the ceremony ended, an older woman approached. She had to be 70, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much loss. My son was in your unit, she said quietly. Specialist Marcus Webb. Claire remembered. Webb had been 24, medic like her, first one hit in the ambush. I'm sorry, Claire said. I tried to save him. I know you did. He wrote about you in his letters, said you were the toughest medic he'd ever met, that you never backed down, never quit. The woman's voice cracked. He admired you. He shouldn't have. I survived and he didn't. You survived because you were in a different position. That's not your fault. The woman took Claire's hand. For 3 years, I believed my son died in service to his country. And he did. But I also believed it was honorable, necessary. Now I know it was murder. And the only reason I know, the only reason anyone knows, is because you refused to let them bury the truth with his body. Tears tracked down Claire's face before she could stop them. He deserved better. Yes, he did. They all did. But because of you, the man who killed them is in prison, and that matters. It doesn't bring my son back, but it matters. The woman pulled Claire into a hug, held her while she cried for the first time in 3 years. When Claire finally pulled back, the cemetery was mostly empty. Just Carlisle waiting by the car, giving her space. Claire walked to Webb's headstone, placed a hand on the cool marble. I kept my promise, she said quietly. I made it matter. The stone had no answer. But that was okay. She didn't need one anymore. 3 years ago, Claire Morgan had died in Kandahar, and Claire Bennett had crawled out of the wreckage. A quiet nurse. Invisible. Safe. But Claire Bennett had never really existed. She was just armor, protection, a way to survive when survival seemed impossible. Now standing in Arlington, surrounded by the names of soldiers who'd trusted the wrong people, Claire understood something fundamental. You couldn't be invisible and make a difference. Couldn't be silent and demand justice. Couldn't hide from the truth and expect it to save you. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was stand up, speak out, refuse to disappear even when disappearing was easier. The quiet ones weren't always weak. Sometimes they were just waiting for the right moment to roar. And when they did, the world had no choice but to listen. Claire walked back to the car, got in beside Carlisle. Where to? Carlisle asked. Claire thought about the classes she'd teach, the soldiers she'd train, the systems she'd challenge. Thought about a life spent fighting instead of hiding. Forward, she said. Always forward. And for the first time in 3 years, she believed it.